and like she's sitting in the kitchen doing dishes, looking out the kitchen window, and a kayak goes off the patio roof into the pool.
Well, you've done it. You've tuned into an episode of Tales from the Crypts. If you haven't heard of my guest today, you'll quickly find why he's an important part of the whitewater community ethos. In fact, my guest talks about how while learning to kayak in Arizona over 2 decades ago, he'd frequently check out Four Corners Riversports in Durango, Colorado to get himself equipped with the latest and greatest gear out there. I know it's shocking, but I'm not doing this podcast to make money, and you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone in a kayaking shop getting rich either. I've taken on a couple of sponsors because I love what they offer, and they've thrown a few bucks at me to help me manage the costs of hosting the podcast. So if you need some kayaking gear, be sure to check out Four Corners Riversports online or in their shop. Four Corners Riversports is located in Durango, Colorado. They're a full-service paddle sports retail and rental store. If you're looking to get on the water, look no further than Four Corners Riversports. Call them at 970-259-3893 or visit their website at www.riversports.com. Hey, this episode's also sponsored by Taylor Barker with the group Real Estate Steamboat. I've known and paddled with Taylor for years, and he brings passion to everything he does. Steamboat Springs is a wonderful town with the Yampa River running right through it and has a vibrant and friendly boating community. If you're thinking of making a move to the Steamboat area or purchasing a vacation home, be sure to get in touch with Taylor. He's happy to give you a lay of the land, the real estate market, and to help find the perfect property for you. You can reach him at 336-314-4353 or by email at taylor@brokerintheboat.com. You can find those links in the show notes. This podcast is also being featured in paddlinglife.com. Paddlinglife.com does a wonderful job of finding all the most interesting happenings in the world of paddling and bringing them straight to you in the form of news, interviews, articles, videos, and more. Check out paddlinglife.com.
You know who made it.
Hello and welcome to Tales from the Crypts, a whitewater storytelling podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Cripps. My guest today hails from one of the driest states in the United States. Could someone who learned to kayak, someone who grew up, and someone who lives in Arizona really be worthy of being a guest on a whitewater storytelling podcast? Well, today we're going to put that proposition to the test. But I assure you this isn't your ordinary desert kayaker. Starting in the mid-2000s and for at least a solid decade, he tantalized the kayaking community with images of impossibly beautiful and elusive flooding desert gorges being kayaked in full bloom. He started his own video production company, putting out movies under the title Huckin Huge, and it was guaranteed that his films would provide adventures that would live up to that title. His videos expanded from Arizona to numerous whitewater classics, as well as firsties across the west coast of the United States, into Canada, and even overseas into places like Japan. But I assure you that his story extends well beyond that of the vagabond Class 5 kayaker, and I'm really looking forward to digging into it today. So Cody Howard, welcome to the show.
Kevin, thank you, man. Quite the introduction. And I'm sitting out here in Phoenix, Arizona, looking over the beautiful desert with no water in sight.
True to the intro.
Totally.
But now is like post runoff in Arizona. Did you get any boating in this year?
Yeah, man. For the first time in almost 5 years, I actually got back in the boat, and I hit up Tonto Creek, and it was a good, medium-ish flow, and everything kind of fit. And when you get these fleeting little bits of rain down here in the desert, you got to jump on it. And so I got that and missed out on all my permits for the salt. So struck out on that. So I missed out on the whole salt thing. But,
Yeah, I was lucky last year. I'd never been to the salt before. Last year, I jumped on somebody's permit when it was super high, and that was fun. I feel like I was probably been spoiled.
Sweet. Yeah, I heard there's some Colorado crews coming into the desert, and I don't know, did you guys get it at like 15K?
It wasn't that high. I think it had spiked the night I got there. We put on at maybe like 9,500, and then it was dropping throughout the rest of the trip. But
That's
yeah,
like
it was
that's like
fun.
triple what I've ever gotten before.
Really? See,
Yeah.
I'm beating the Arizona expert.
Yeah. No, that's huge. You know, growing up here, I'd hear stories of people, particularly my mentors, in the desert here, they'd hit it up and make it from put in to Lake Roosevelt in a couple hours.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, yeah,
It's
there
got to be a
was,
fun
I
ride.
think the flow was like at 60 to 70K, and it was just,
Wow.
pretty epic. I don't know. I've never seen it, and I don't know if anyone's done it recently like that.
Yeah, you got to get quite a year for that, I'm sure, or quite a
Hmm.
rainstorm maybe.
Hmm.
Cool. Well, I think we have a lot to cover today, so let's kind of jump into it. And I'm going to start with sort of what I did with Dave and a few other people, my last episode, and get a little bit into the origin story because it isn't. I mean, I guess in general, being a kayaker isn't a very popular thing, but especially not when you come out of dry states like Arizona. So, how did you get into boating to begin with?
So, yeah, growing up in Phoenix, Arizona, we there's there was no days out to the river and seeing kayakers go by, and any sort of introduction to whitewater at all, except for my family. Every summer we would go up to Montreal, and just outside of Montreal we would hang out, next to St. Lawrence River, and particularly the Rouge. And up there on the Rouge River is this, awesome little classic rafting segment. And I linked up with this rafting company up there called Vive, and I actually think they're still around. And I was just fascinated by the kayakers. So that was kind of like the first little taste. I was sitting on the raft thinking, what the hell am I doing? As like a 12, 13-year-old, seeing the kayakers run.
Yeah.
Like there's the Sisters, and it's a pretty famous couple drops. I think there's like
Hmm.
5 or 6 sisters there, and I was just blown away as we were portaging the rafts around or hiking up out of the hill. And
Yeah.
then my dad, his buddy came over, and his buddy just happened to be a legendary paddler out here named Jim McComb. And Jim McComb had pioneered like pretty much the majority of the epic runs out here in Phoenix. And he's a local Phoenix guy, and he was just eager to get everybody into kayaking. And I always kind of reflect back on that. I think Jim was like kind of making his team, so he had other boaters to go
Yeah.
out with. It didn't matter if you were 13 years old or my dad, in his mid 50s. They just come over, and like everybody out here in Phoenix, Arizona, pretty much every house, every condo, every apartment has a pool. And
Hmm.
so like pool boaters, and
Yeah.
he came
Perfect place
over,
to learn, right?
a
Like,
perfect place to learn,
yeah.
and like that's where everybody starts, or in the flatwaters. And so
Yeah.
my dad had learned with Jim, and I remember with my little brother Bradt, we were looking out the window through the kitchen, like, what in the world is Dad doing? What is this thing? Like, what are they doing? And like Jim's like, up to his chest in the pool, helping my dad learn how to roll. And it was an old, I think it was made by Piranha, or Rotobat. And it just basically, we still got it
Mm.
hanging. We got it hanging up in the rafters. It's just a
Nice.
giant hot dog of a boat, no rocker at all, big round ends. It was sweet. And then my dad learned how to roll, later on that afternoon. Took him a few hours, and then next weekend he was like, "Boys, get in the pool. You got to learn this." And that kicked it all off. And Jim was super stoked that he had just recruited 3 new boaters: my dad, myself, and my brother Bradt. And we, of course, hit up the lower salt, which is dam released here in Phoenix, and it's the draw to that river is just, it's a party central. I mean, there's tubes, titties, and beers. It's everything you
Sure.
got out there, and it's a big party, and it's like, a float, and there's a little rapid called Snaggletooth that's just essentially like a 6-inch pour over. But to a brand new Phoenix kayaker, it was just everything and massive. And so I had been super big in hockey for years. And as soon as I got a taste of whitewater, I pretty much hung up my skates.
Wow.
And yeah, it was,
It bit you from the get-go.
from the get-go, it was so epic. And, you know, so I think this was probably, I was talking with my brother Bradt, because my brother Bradt and I, we were it. That was pretty much it. But ASU, Arizona State University down in Tempe,
Mm-hmm.
it was kind of the heart of the boating community here in Phoenix. And they had somehow weaseled their way in, a couple kayakers, Jim McComb included, had weaseled their way into allowing the insurance of the ASU's pool have us a roll night down there. And so
Oh,
we'd
nice.
all get together and do a roll night. And, I'm just in awe of these epic boaters all around there. And this is around like 1996. So
Hmm.
coming up on like 30 years now.
Wow.
And I'm, young teens. My brother, Bradt, is like 10 or 11 years old. And we were just like blown away. Big pizza nights afterwards, the whole roll boating community. And, so we got bit. And it was, I don't know how to put it, but it just bred a type of desire to drop everything, no matter how high, how low, how wacky, how crazy it was. Just drop everything and try to save up allowances. Whatever it was you could do to get gas money to join in on one of Jim McComb's missions, or go try to do it ourselves. And it started with actually like some of our first like vertical descents in the kayak was off our roof, clearing the pool deck into the pools.
No way.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And you know what? Like, God bless my brother Bradt. He lives in Denver now. He paddles. He's just had his second little kid, a little baby girl named Brooke, and
Awesome.
yeah, and he's still paddling up there. And I'm the older brother. He's the young brother. So we climb up on top of the roof, and it's like a good steep pitch, little gable roof, and I'm just kind of holding him up on the ridge line. Of course, the older brother's got to let the younger brother test out at first, because man, we had to clear like 10 feet of pool deck.
Oh,
And
man.
like, no joke, I mean, there's like 11-year-old and a 14-year-old kind of eyeballing engineering, like, can this slide and clear the pool deck? Well, like, or our ghost boating attempts landed, but the stern would clap the pool deck. But I
Oh,
was like, we're kids,
yeah.
and we're like, okay, so I think some weight would send this. And so Bradt went off
You figured out how to find class 5 boating in your backyard.
in the backyard, and it
Mm.
was crazy, because we did it. And God bless my mom too. She put a stop to it immediately, concerned for our safety, but also probably because we caused thousands of dollars of damage to the roof. As like, we're
Can't be
just
good for the
kayaking
roof.
down the roof, just tearing off roof tiles, clearing in the deck. So then we started to do this when no one was home.
Is she like in the house at the time, like hearing this
Oh,
thunderstorm on the roof? Like, what the hell's
yeah.
going on?
She's like, she tells a story often. Like, she's sitting in the kitchen doing dishes, looking out the kitchen window, and a kayak goes off the patio roof into the pool. So, that was that. And then like, and then we started doing these trips. A lot of the trips, like, we got our real first taste of whitewater going back up in the summertime to the River Rouge and getting on the River Rouge. And that was just mind blowing. And it was just massive. And then, we started taking that energy and taking that, that vibe down into the desert. And we started joining McComb on these epic trips. And, what we learned quick was that the summertime Rouge kayaking and, the kayaking that we had done was like bright and summer, and, you're in just like a splash top. But then the kayaking trips that Jim McComb would take us on in Arizona are just notoriously terrible weather, because that's the only way that the rivers are going to run, is that like, if it's just like end of the world storms come through the desert here, the conditions are terrible. Jim had this epic truck that he welded all these bumpers, and he welded this rack on the front bumper to hold a little Honda Trail 90 dirt bike. So he was self-contained, so he didn't have to rely on fucking anybody else to run shuttles with him. He could do it himself, wearing a
Nice.
football helmet, and we're just dropping into all these creeks. And, he was a very stern, super stern, epic mentor. And, he'd done the first ascent of Hell's Gate on Tonto
Oh,
Creek,
cool. Yeah,
and a bunch of
that's
our stuff.
great. That
Epic.
was my introduction to Arizona. I did like
No
the
way.
Christopher Creek through Tonto.
Did you
And
do that all in one trip?
yeah, we did we did 3 days, but we did
Amazing.
like first day just did Christopher, kind of put on later, and then
Yep.
camped at the bottom of Christopher, then do 2 days through Tonto, which was pretty long days actually.
Yeah. And it's funny.
I fell victim to that very problem of the bad weather, because I think we had relatively good weather because we were going off snowmelt. I think there had been some rain before, but it stopped. And I was just like, oh yeah, we're going down to Arizona. It's going to be warm. Like, I'm just going to, I did have a dry suit at least, but I didn't have enough like other stuff. And that first night, I just remember freezing my ass off, and then like spending the morning trying to get the frost off all my camping gear. And learned that lesson quickly.
Dude,
by the end of the trip, it was like sweltering hot, and we were in the saguaro cactuses and stuff.
Yeah. It's like, that's how it goes out here. And it's, you cut through, and particularly like, you're right on the bottom part of the Mogollon Rim, and some of the Sedona's runs and some of these Mogollon Rim runs would take you from, the pines to the sandstone, and it's pretty epic. And you just cruise through all that layers of geology and weather, and all of a sudden you're in like, giant saguaro, Sonoran Desert Forest. It's pretty epic, but it's always, unless it's just like, I've had very, very few of them. Those just picture perfect bluebird days, but it's always just some big drama, which leads to, some misadventures, some epic, just getting to the put-in out here is a feat in itself. And that was kind of Jim's forte. Was this dude was Google Earth before there was any Google Earth. Like, you could be sitting at him and just pick his mind because he was a hunter. He was just an epic outdoorsman. And
how old was he when he was doing those missions with you?
Oh man, he had to have been. He was in his late 40s, early 50s.
Okay.
Yep. And then he pioneered a lot of this alongside Tyler Williams, who's up in Flagstaff, and that was kind of the name. Yeah. And Tyler was like wrote all the guidebooks. He's Mr. Arizona for sure, and that was kind of the two communities. Is we had boaters here in the pool in Phoenix, and then we had all the Grand Canyon raft guides and the Flagstaff crew up there. And we never really collaborated often. Sometimes we would link up, but it was definitely kind of like a Phoenix crew going out and a Flagstaff crew going out. And we'd always kind of meet each other at the put in because there's one thing running. And that really led on to my brother Bradt and I doing a lot of Animus River days up in Durango learning in Durango. And then also when we got a taste of California and we drove over to the Kern and we did Brush Creek, that was it. It was like lights out. It was amazing. It was out of control. Oh, it was heaven. And then, and then that really kind of started everything, like just searching out waterfalls and all this. And granted, this is like the 1999, 2000 timeframe, which when I look back on it now, like was like an epic time to become a new boater, because that was just, it was wild with kayaking's, booming popularity. And we just remember calling to like basically Four Corners Riversports. There was a Southwest Whitewater in Durango, and then of course Sierra South in Kernville. We just call and find out whatever the new riot boat was. We're always like, oh man, the riot team is going out there. So here's our like, starved Phoenix boaters, and we're just like watching Team Riot go around in the bus and just send all this big stuff. And it was just mind blowing, obsessive. And it just bred like some pretty obsessive kayakers out here. But, Jim kept us kind of sane. We were young kids. And so he kind of kept us under wraps and, kept us from becoming too much of kooks, because, that can spawn a lot of kookery out here. It's like, just getting on whatever you can get on. So,
reality check to give you
big
a little
time reality check. big time. And if it didn't come from Jim, it came from Mother Nature and a river. You know,
Yeah, it
we had
happens pretty
these.
fast. Yeah.
Oh, it's huge fast. And like, we would see all these things as like, we're young teenagers and it's like, oh yeah, let's go send this. And it would just be, you know, river would beat us down. We go back, tails tucked, figure out what we did, practice on the roof, go back out and try next spring.
Practice on the roof.
It was pretty wild. And then, what was cool too, before we got kicked out of this pool at ASU was ASU had, those Tuesday pool nights, where we'd go down there and roll, and they had these certain levels of high dives. And so we'd like go from like the 5-footer, the 10-footer to like the 15-footer. And then no one did the upper one. It was just like practicing seal launches, but it was, to us, that was like everything. It was like, those were like waterfalls. I mean, we were even like spreading like hoses off the high dives to like simulate like some like water tension breakage, and stuff like that.
Love it. I love the energy and everything, right?
Like,
it
so
was awesome. Yeah.
We were thriving on it. And, and then I got my driver's license, which really kind of kicked things off. It was like, all right, this is late 2000, I would say, and just getting after it. And, all of a sudden I got my driver's license, throw my little brother in the boat and in the back of the truck, meet up with Jim McComb, Andy McComb, Jim's son. And we'd go try to just find new runs, find new things. And, what we learned quick was like pretty much all of Arizona, if you look at it as a kayaker's perspective, it's all illegal. Like you don't have many legal boating options. Like all the stuff we were looking at was like
because of reservation territory.
Reservations. Oh yeah, we're like just like these crown jewels of epic, untouchable things were tucked away in the reservation. So some stealth boating and some stealth missions and all that type of stuff. But then also we have these canals all through Phoenix, and so we would try to like this is, we didn't have satellite images back then. And so we just drive and research and talk to farmers and everybody of like where a little culvert could be. And we found a couple waves in these canals and a couple little diversion slides. And so like we were out there, poaching the canals and some like pretty sketchy stuff, canals are more dangerous than the river, just to clarify.
Sure.
Like, those things are freaking dangerous as hell. And coming from Arizona, we didn't really have an eye for that type of danger. So there were some misadventures and some epic beatdowns and some near misses in these canals as well.
Jeez.
And
just like man-made hazards that you weren't prepared for.
Dude, like man-made hazards that you're not prepared for, like the strainer that's like, just past the eddy that drops underneath like the highway, mixed in with shopping carts.
Oh, God.
It's like, I'll never forget, like I rolled over and just got tangled up in a shopping cart. And I was like, okay, it was pretty hardcore. And so swimming. And then of course, like the only egress out of the canals is like a pair of steps somewhere downstream. So you're just like holding on to the sides, trying to get to these steps before you get flushed over. It's pretty wild, like in fact,
that's intense.
Up until a couple of years ago, I think that there was a crew of whitewater kayakers coming down and training the Phoenix Fire Department on swiftwater rescue in the canals at some of these same waves that we used to poach back in the day.
Really?
Yeah, kind of crazy. And like, they go to the kayaking community like, hey, train us for the whitewater rescue.
That's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, it's
I feel like whitewater people tend to complain about that, right? Like the fire departments go out and do these training things and it's like, yeah, you guys are not, we spend way more time out there on the river than you do. Like you could learn some stuff from how we do things. Big time.
And I think there was like some dude that was keen on that. And he might have had a friend in the kayaking community, but he's like, these are the guys who we get to learn swiftwater rescue from. And it is, I think that's, I'm not sure anymore. It's kind of ever since, everything gets shut down and all the canals are boarded up and you can't get in these areas and development, in Phoenix, it's, the desert's rapidly getting deleted with these massive expanses of, developments as well. So, there is some water issues that are staring us in the face too, as people propose new communities. And it's just like, I sit there as a kayaker too. And I'm like a kayaker who like intimately familiar with the waterways here, and I'm like, where do these developers think the water's coming from? You know?
Sure.
Yeah,
I
I'm
mean,
like,
even here on the Front Range, which I'm sure is much less of a situation than you guys have down there in Phoenix, but
man, I'm
well,
like, I could tell everybody. I'm like, yeah, Sycamore Creek and Salt. I mean, that's like sitting at like 100 CFS. Like, I mean, I wouldn't
yeah,
feed
that's
a
right.
couple thousand homes at all.
Yeah. I mean, how's the next generation of kayakers going to get out there and get tangled up in a shopping cart?
I hope they do. I hope they do, because I'll tell you what, man, like that upbringing in that time of kayaking in Phoenix, Arizona was like such a tease that when we did get like that week off of, spring break, or, Macomb threw us in the truck and we got like 7 days outside of the state of Arizona kayaking, those were like some cherished memories. And
Oh,
then
wow.
like, we got to meet the kayaking community, like the kayakers out there. And that was just mind blowing. I was just blown away by like the outdoor knowledge and the just how everybody zigged and zagged on the river, and everybody knew what to do, and setting up camps and all this stuff. It was all new, and they were just like the pros at it all. And it was super cool because it introduced me to a world of like outdoorsmen and
Mm.
outdoors ladies, that like it was like, I learned so much, and we all soaked it in so much, because I mean, out here in Phoenix, you don't get many of those opportunities.
Yeah. It reminds me too, I don't know if it's quite an apt analogy or not, but I've heard that from surfers that like the Florida surfers, the people that are kind of like always
Mm,
jonesing for some decent waves compared to, your California or West Coast surfers that just have consistent good surf almost all the time, that those Florida surfers are like have a special skill set because they can figure out how to use like very little power and energy, in the water to
yeah,
to to do tricks and move around and stuff like that. And
totally. Isn't Slater from Florida?
is he? I don't know that.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think he's from Florida. I
probably.
mean,
Yeah, yeah.
man, I
There you
mean,
go.
those types of star scenarios and those types of, I wouldn't call, I mean, just like the nursery of boating in the desert, it definitely bred a very motivated paddler. And I'm sitting here now, and ASU doesn't have any kayaking club anymore. And
Hmm,
I don't.
that's
I
a
mean,
bummer.
I'm in the fifth largest city in America, and I think I'm like that. I know of like maybe one or two or three class 5 boaters here. It's just
Yeah,
like,
that's
dude, I'm
rough.
alone on the island
That's
out
rough.
here. It's crazy. I mean, there's a dude in Tucson. There's the Flagstaff crew, but other than that, it's like you got to travel and go get after it. And so
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what we ended up doing, back in the day. And then I once I got my driver's license, I got a lot of family, the Howard family. Um, Good friends with the Garcias too,
Oh,
up
really?
in Bozeman, Montana. Yeah. And so
Mhm.
they would, I would go up there and help my uncle build, and I would help wash booties for Geyser Whitewater. That's sitting on the
No way.
Gallatin. Yeah. Yeah. And so I washed booties, and I'll never forget, oh, what's her name? She played, Kelly in Saved by the Bell.
Oh,
Chris, Tiffany
Tiffany
Amber
Amber.
Thesson. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, I
I
ran
got that quiz.
safety. Yeah, there you go. She came up, and I'll never forget. It was like the whole. I was 16 years old. It's like Saved by the Bell was huge back when I was growing up and everything. And there's Tiffany Amber Thesson. She's going on a rafting trip, and it was
No
like a
way.
massive moment. Oh yeah,
Oh,
it was pretty
that's
cool.
a teenager's dream come true.
It was rad. And then, I got introduced to Wave Train Kayak Team up there, and that was cool. It was a little, kayak team, and Eddie Hake, he lived up in Big Sky, and Tyler Maxwell. Tyler Maxwell was big with Bomb Flow and Bomb Snow,
Mm-hmm.
and back in the day, and that crew was epic, man. I mean, that was where, I was 16 years old, learning a lot, washing booties for Geyser Whitewater, and then like, you'd hear these whispers of like Big Timber Creek, and those things for me were just the ultimate, the most massive,
Yeah.
like out there, as crazy as it all can get. And I'm still figuring it out on the Gallatin River. I'm still trying to like learn just the ways of the water. But I was like, yeah, we were learning quite a bit back in those days.
Yeah, I
And
didn't
then
realize how much experience you got early on in your
it was
teenage
it was
days.
early, yeah, because then I'd like, come back from a summer in Bozeman, And then I'd sit here in the winter just dreaming of going back up in the summer. And so I'm graduating high school. I applied to Fort Collins, and I think everyone was telling me it was like called Fort Leisure. And and like, dude, I don't do school at all. I got denied from Fort Collins. They said no, you can't do it. But I accepted into Missoula, and so I went to Missoula, and this was 2001. I'm sitting in my my dorm, and September 11th happens. And I'm like, oh boy, and so I was just like, man, I ride out the rest of the winter as an Arizona boy in the Missoula, Montana winter. And that kicked my butt. It was it wasn't the sunny Tiffany Amber Thesson, Gallatin summertime Montana that I knew, man.
They didn't put this on the brochure. Huh?
Oh, dude, it was ridiculous. So like I just sat in, the dorm room trying to do some school here and there, and then not doing too well. And snow up to the windows of the dorm room, and it was like just praying for spring to come. And actually, when spring did come, I made a friend out there in the dorms who kayaked. His name is Ryan Palmer, and we went out kayaking and got after it. And we warming up, and we're together on a little creek outside of Missoula called Mill Creek, and that's where Ryan basically knocked his head, and I think got like I think he's pretty knocked out by the time he got into a pin, and I couldn't retrieve him out of the pin, and he passed away on the river. And so it was a combo of things there where I was just like, all of a sudden, Ryan's story is online. You can read all about it. I often go back and just read what I wrote when I was 18 years old about this incident. And, it kind of had opened up my eyes quite a bit. Jim McComb had always told us of, coming across, some fatalities in the river, and just how fucking serious this is, boys. Like, stop screwing around, don't play around the areas, stay away from those strainers, teaching us the ways of the river. And then to see that up close and personal in Missoula.
Was it just you and him out on the water?
It was just me and him on the water. Actually, you know what? He had broken his paddle, and I was more experienced, better boater than him at the time. And so I was just basically like, dude, I'll take your paddle. I'll take the half paddle. Here's my paddle. We're on river left and the car's on river right. Let's get the next eddy on river right and get out. We're done. And so he's got my paddle, and he's already shaken up from what had just happened when he broke his paddle, which basically, like, Mill Creek, I don't know if anybody even paddles this. And, the Missoula boaters could tell me. I don't think it is literally like just a boulder. It is barely even runnable by Arizona standards. And, he flipped right again, bash his head. T-rescues, couldn't quite do it, not responding to T-rescue, all that type of stuff. And then went off this one drop into a pin. I dislodged him from the pin, and that was just too late. He had been underneath, getting beat up. And I'm not sure if it was it was pretty huge. And so that was massive. And I sat there and just kind of sat with this moment, and for a while. And basically it's like, what, school's not mixing with me, all this type of stuff. September 11th had just happened, and I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to go into the military, and I went down to the recruiting stations, the offices, and I was like, I should fly. I could fly, probably. I should go fly. Air Force took one look at me, and they did the vision test. And like, dude, you can barely even see anything. You can't fly a plane. So like, I walked out. I was kind of like, okay, well, that's it. I'm not trying anymore. I'm not going to join the military. I'll just keep on walking. And like, out on the pillars, smoking, these two Marines leaning up against a pillar, and they see me walk out of the Air Force, and they're like, I'll never forget. They kind of yell across the parking lot, like, hey, kid, you know what they call the Air Force? I'm like, no. And they're like, yeah, it's called the Chair Force. why don't you come on over here, show you what to do. And
this is where the real men go, huh?
oh man, it was that kind of breeding ground. It was like, man, these guys were just, again, just giants. And I walked into the Marines, and they warm welcome, and I fit perfect in the Marine Corps. And so went to boot camp, thrived in boot camp, pretty much graduated top of the class.
Where
and
was
then
boot camp for you?
Boot camp. So I joined west of the Mississippi. So everybody that joins west of the Mississippi goes to San Diego, and everyone that joins east of the Mississippi goes to Paris Island.
Okay.
So you've got two, all females. I think still today, all females train in Paris Island. Okay. And the thing is that, there's, amongst all the military branches, there's a lot of like, shit talking back and forth, all that type of stuff. And then amongst the Marines, it's like, well, did you go to boot camp at Paris Island, or are you a Hollywood Marine out in San Diego? And then we're like, oh yeah, Paris Island, all you guys got is sand fleas and sand, no mountains. And then like out in San Diego, we're like humping and rucking over huge mountains all the time. So it's like we're in shape, and all this type of stuff. So it was there's those little battles, and I loved it. And it was I remember sitting down right on the final weeks of boot camp, and one of the most hardcore drill instructors we had, Sergeant Chambers, this dude had like a 16-inch waist and like 44-inch shoulders, just a V of muscles, and just the funniest damn dude you ever met too, but could just, he's a freak of nature. And he just sat down, and he's like, okay, all your recruits sit down right now. I'm going to tell you something. It's like, you all signed up during wartime. And then he pretty much turned on TV, and it was the shock and awe over Baghdad. And he was like, tell you right now, like, some of you Marines are not coming home from this. Whew. And that was another gut check. It was like, yeah, well, this isn't all fun and games and, rah, rah. It's like, this is real. And so like, when you sign up, and that's the saying, like, United States Marine Corps, there's a lot of USMC stands for a lot of things. Well, one of them's you sign the motherfucking contract, and the other one is, and there's a bunch of other ones, but like it goes on and on. Like Army, Army stands for ain't ready to be a Marine yet, and like, stuff like this. There's all this shit talking, but like he's like, yeah, you guys are going overseas. You guys, that's what you're doing. You're going to Iraq. And sure enough, I was in an amphibious assault battalion. I found myself in the middle of Fallujah, on the very first battle of Fallujah, like posted up on the Euphrates River, sitting there, invading Fallujah, Iraq. And wow, yeah, that was pretty wild, and it was pretty epic. And that was a pretty monumental battle, because what had happened is that we had all gone into Iraq, and the U.S. military had taken over Iraq pretty quickly. And then we turned it over to the Army, which is an occupational force. And then, the Army's sitting there, and they're kind of got their hands tied. They don't really know what to do. They're they're trying to rebuild Iraq and all that. Meanwhile, Fallujah just became this hotbed of like unpatrolled, untouched area that everybody on the other side kind of coalesced and sat there and trained and like came up with the next plan. And like, so then all of a sudden it got to the point where it was like, okay, the Marines need to come back in, and we need to, the 101st Airborne Army got relieved, and my unit of Marines came in, and then that kicked off basically Fallujah and the Sunni Triangle combat tour. And so, there's
right in the middle of intense, critical situation. Yeah.
Big stuff all the time, and it was, and it was on the Euphrates River. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm like, man, you'd see the diurnals, you'd see it come up and down. I try to guesstimate the flows. And, we were sometimes like even doing like little ambush things on the banks of the Euphrates River. And I'm just like, this is pretty wild. This is pretty psychedelic. Like, I'm sitting out here, I know what the mission is, and we're executing our mission daily, all day, every day. And then, you get these moments of peace next to the river. And it was, it was a trip, man. It was a trip. We were kicking indoors and then ambushing down by the river. It's pretty wild. And that lasted for 9 months. And
was that like when you were in that, was it just kind of constant tension? I mean, you said you had a little bit of relief during parts of the day, but were you just kind of like always on edge, or did it become normalized at some point?
No, it never did. And it was pretty wild because, I'll never forget my first day in theater is what we called it in theater. When we get to the theater of war, we got there and we arrived. We drove for 3 days from Kuwait all the way up into Fallujah in this giant convoy looking for IEDs. And dude, this is back in the day. Like this is back in 2003 going on 2004, where we were the first thing after the shock and awe event and the invasion of Iraq. And so we're rolling around, and I just called it my desert runner. I'm rolling around and like we're in Hummers without doors and no tops, just on the turret with like, a cigarette and like rolled up sleeves, and then we learned about IEDs, and like, so now the military of course knows about IEDs and all that stuff. But back in the day, it was pretty massive. I mean, we're just rolling around completely clueless to the type of combat we were jumping into almost, not clueless. We're trained for it, but the saying is that you're always training for the last war,
Right.
And, so like we were learning the new tactics that everybody was doing, and this new tactics, IEDs and ambushes and stuff like that. So we got to Fallujah fired up, but I'll never forget, we went through the gates at night. I don't know what time it was, but it's pitch black. And I just remember hearing incoming fire and seeing tracers outside the gate. There's guards all on this gate, all around our little hooches, our little camp inside this gate, Camp Fallujah, and just tracers and, off in the distance kind of glows of fires and everything. And it was just so apocalyptic and so wild that I was just kind of like, everybody's scared. Everybody's scared, except for the dudes and gals that had been there. Like, you'd hear incoming coming in, everybody's ducking, like jumping for cover. And then somebody that's been there for like 9 months to a year is just kind of like walking on past, like, get up, man. Like 1,000-yard stairs, like, get up. And, fast forward 9 months, you're that guy kind of walking on down, and the new people coming in, they're all jumping for cover, and you've kind of been there and done it. But I separate that deployment into two different things, because we invaded Fallujah. And then the U.S. President Bush called a ceasefire, said no more, and so we had to pull out and then just patrol for the second half of it. And we just did these patrols, and we're like Marines. We're like, we know exactly where this is going to go, and this is in 2004. And you can kind of, history tells exactly where that all went, But we are. All the politics and everything aside, we're all 18, 19, 20 years old. And, we're just there for the guy next to you in your unit. You don't really think too much about why you're there or what you're doing. They didn't really have that luxury as a young Marine.
I've always heard that. Yeah. I've never been in the military. My dad was actually in the Marines for 4 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
You wouldn't know it from looking at him now, but I guess he's also in his 80s, so give him a pass. But
very cool.
Yeah,
very cool.
He never saw active combat though, but he got really close. Really close. He kind of just, in fact, he was he was close to being part of the Bay of Pigs if that went off. So it was pretty wild. Yeah.
Wow. So I've got our little son. My wife and I have our little son, and he's 5 years old, and his name is River. And little River, and I've always worried. I'm like, as a Marine Corps dad, like, you kind of want to, you don't want to be too strict, but I also feel like I learned so much in the Marine Corps, and the discipline, and just discipline, and, just the physical discipline, the mental discipline, and the discipline, and just uniforms, and just how you present yourself has done wonders for me in my life. Like I was saying, I was up in Montana kind of floundering. And then I get the Marine Corps and thrive in the Marine Corps. And, water was my thing. And the Marines are, a water-based unit. That's kind of the signature of it, is like, from sea to land, and air, land, and sea. And so, I rose my hand for everything. And that's one of the things that one of those badass recruiters just told me, He's like, Cody, when you get there, just raise your hand for everything. So I rose my hand and be like, go pick up all the cigarettes, go pick up all the trash, go do this. You're on watch. Oh, you've got schooling. You get, martial arts schooling. You get to do this. You get to do that. And I just kept on raising my hands and kept on getting these opportunities, and ended up, going into the reconnaissance and doing the recon indoc and doing pre-BRC, which is basically a reconnaissance unit. And then it came time for me to re-up, as they call it, to re-enlist. And I just kind of got out, and I was like, I had raised my hand for everything. I had 5 different jobs. By the time I got out, I'd seen combat. I'd gone all these deployments all over the place. And I was like, you know what? I think it's time for me to get out now. And the moment I got out, I was sitting there, and it was like another big reality check. Like, okay, what now? I get home to Phoenix, and it's like a big what now moment. And I was like, you know what? I got a moment. You get like 30 days to kind of get your shit back together in civilian life.
Okay.
At least in the time I got out in 2005, 2006, I had 30 days to get it back together. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go pick up the kayak again. And it was
First thing on your mind, huh?
First thing on the mind, totally. Because like it was,
I guess it's something you can kind of ground yourself with, right? Like,
Exactly. And never forgot about it. I was always like, like when we were in like Fallujah and seeing rivers and seeing I sat out there for all that, it's like you never forget it. And the kayaking had so much similarities just in base of like, I hadn't really experienced it yet, but I then got to experience expedition kayaking. And expedition kayaking and just basically the discipline it involves to pull off some expeditions. It's very similar to stuff in the military. It's not so strict in the military. When you get into these, more streamlined, high speed, elite units, these guys are just guys, they're all talking, but everybody's all looking out for each other. And everybody is like super physically fit. And like, so I thought, being a Marine, I was like, I can just hop right back into kayaking. And boy, I'll tell you what, like within 2 years of getting out of the Marine Corps, I think I was hiking over, what the heck is that called? Bishop Pass into the Middle Fork of the Kings. Dying. I was the last of the entire everybody. Everybody's in front of me, and I was just like, man, I am not in shape for this. And it was like the kayakers again, like the coolest outdoorsmen, the most in shape. They know everything that's going on. Like it was super cool, and it was just like a wealth of knowledge that I just thrived in again. It's like, wow, this is it. And then of course, the obvious thrill and the danger and everybody looking out for each other. It was a good transition, because I look back on that time of getting out of the military, and I see what some of my Marine Corps buddies did, and they weren't as fortunate to have like a kayaking community kind of embrace them. They're like working at the tire shop, drinking 6-pack a night, and that doesn't bode well for a lot of veterans.
Sure.
And so I always kind of kept that in the back of my head. I was like, I'm in a unique spot somehow, Cody. You figured it out. Like you kind of found a little way to, reassimilate into society.
Do you think you came back with any PTSD? Yeah. Or any of that kind of like mental stress that you,
big time.
Yeah.
You? Well, and I never felt it. I never felt like there was like a pre-Marine Corps Cody and a post-Marine Corps Cody, but like, with the PTSD and all that type of stuff. But like when we got back from Fallujah, we had a particularly harrowing experience in Fallujah. And, the command sat us all down, and for like this, I don't know how to call it. It's like a reintroduction into garrison, which is just base life again. You're back in California. You're on Camp Pendleton. You're at your base. Everything's cool. You're not doing combat. They just basically blanket everybody as X amount of PTSD, and started, and I think that they were trying to I think that we were some of the first units to come back and start to see therapy and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Where
I was
now I
wondering.
know,
Sounds like it's
yeah,
been a lot of progression over the last couple
a,
decades
a
in that area.
ton, a ton,
Mm.
a ton. And, you know, like it's been 20 years now. In fact, I just came back from my 20-year Marine Corps reunion of everybody I served with. And I think that, like, yeah, the US and just basically everybody has woken up to the fact that, like, you know, we need to take care of like the mental health of these Marines and soldiers and airmen, you know, everybody coming back. And like that was kind of like we were kind of test dummies for that. And it was, you know, none of us took it really serious, but you know, it was definitely like, oh yeah, maybe that is an issue. So I definitely saw that, and I kind of I would say that I heard a wise thing with like most traumatic experiences. Heard it from a an old school Marine who had just basically said like, oh, this is going to come back and bite you in the ass in about 10 years.
Hmm.
You know, you may not see it now, but you'll recognize something in about 10
Hmm.
years. And, you know, that's kind of how it goes. You know, you then grow up and get out into the world, and then that all kind of comes back to you. And
Yeah,
yeah, but
interesting.
the kayaking transition was just so massive and so beneficial, and right, it just fit perfectly. So I got out of the Marine Corps when I was 22, turning 23, and that kicked it back off. Yeah,
Yeah. Do you think that I guess I have like a number of questions on that.
sure.
Like one, do you think that there was actually I've heard especially people that have seen combat and stuff that come back from the military sort of when they come back to civilian life it just feels dull, like
Mm,
there was so much intensity and importance and you knew exactly what you were there to do and why you were doing it, like every moment of the day. That's kind of like you come back to civilian life, it's like, well, what am I doing here? Like what is my life really about? And I'm wondering if you think that was an aspect of kayaking, is it's like really gave you a purpose and focus and brought that intensity back that maybe you had gotten some like accustomed to.
A
um
1000%, man, a
yeah.
1000%. It's amazing because like um, you know, when I got back, it didn't take. I mean, it maybe a week. I unpacked my shit, boxed up my uniforms. I don't think I've opened up that box since. And I was just like, hey, you know what? Like, I'm gonna go out and go get my kayaking stuff again. And
Mm,
it just like it instantly was like just massive challenge, you know, because like I look at a lot of other extreme sports, and I've always thought that the barrier to entry for whitewater kayaking, particularly like class 5, is just massive. You know, like just the commitment to learn a role, and then the commitment to stick with that role, and then to learn on the rivers. And as most people listening to right now, you know, like you think back on those days fondly, but like at the time, like there was a lot of washout rate, I'm sure,
oh,
more than
it's
like,
huge.
you know,
Yeah.
it's huge. And you know, I got some skateboarder friends, and there's, you know, a lot of washout in skateboarding, but it's not like kayaking. You know, it's like, and to get to class 5 kayaker, you know, and all that type of stuff, or an elite playboater, like that's massive, you know, control and mind control. And then all of a sudden, you know,
Mhm.
like skateboarding, you fall in the parking lot, you break your collarbone, like you and your bros are in the parking lot, no big deal.
Yeah.
But like you flip over and like now all of a sudden you're getting bashed by the, you know, in a hole or at the bottom of the river or something like that. It's like you then have the river to compete with. So like it was just, it's awesome, epic. I don't even know how to put it, man. I just say like I am so thankful for the kayaking community and kayaking and Mother Nature and the river for the transition it gave me.
Hmm.
And, you know, I definitely couldn't do it alone because I mean, I think I've only boated once class 5 solo.
Really.
And it was like I was living, I just spent like a week in Teo Berman's basement up in White Salmon. And I rented a storage unit, and I was living in a storage unit in White Salmon for a minute. It was a really super snowy day, and it was like a solo little white lap in the
Hmm.
snow. And I was just
Hmm.
like, yeah, you know, I loved it. It amplified everything. I poured spirit. You know, the
Mhm.
gorge scared the shit out of me, all this type of stuff. But it was like, man, I'm missing something.
Hmm.
And it was like everybody else on the river. Like I really loved the camaraderie and just the wealth of knowledge on the rivers, you know, because like I'd be going out there and just here in the desert rivers, you know, you could be sitting on a river in an eddy with a geologist and the other guy is like, who studies birds? Ornithologist? Yeah.
What's
And
that?
like, who's the scientist that studies birds? I forget.
Oh, birds.
Yeah, ornithology. Yeah.
Ornithology. Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, something
We'll
like
go
that.
with that.
But dude, I'm sitting there, I'm learning about rocks in the eddy. I'm learning about birds in the eddy. I'm learning about hydraulics and all this type of stuff. And it's just like amazing wealth of knowledge that, the river and the river community would teach me. And it was just a
Yeah,
massive
it is.
transition.
It is so unique. It brings just like people together who would never see each other in normal life otherwise. It's I do
Totally.
think that's a super unique thing. And you're right, ornithology. I just looked it up.
Ornithology, there you
Yeah.
go. Yeah. And then
Okay.
also you got some like knucklehead Marine in the eddy with you, and like a combat veteran Marine. And it's just like you got it all. Or like, dude, I don't know, like a porn star, and stuff like that. Like you got
I've heard about the
they're
classified porn star.
they're out there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, dude.
Yeah.
It's like you got everybody in the mix, and it's just like kayaking is rad. It's cool. You don't really meet too many awesome communities like that. And then the river, the ultimate teacher. The river was huge. And speaking of huge, so I'll derail for a second. Huckin Huge, right?
Yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah,
I gotta
go
say, since you're making this transition, that
Yeah.
I think, I don't know, you'll have to tell me exactly when Huckin Huge formed, but it was that mid knots or something, and this was when I was kind of like just learning to kayak, like probably got my class 3 dialed and was like trying to move up and do some harder stuff. And I definitely was like looking at all the media out there, and I just remember Huckin Huge came along and just put out all these like awesome, just like back, huge montages of all these like cool big drops and everything. And it was definitely like got me fired up for sure about trying to paddle more and see what the possibilities are. Yeah.
That really was it. It was like, yeah, just like, because I was just like me and my brother, this is back, let's rewind before Marine Corps, even before Montana, we were just living on a diet of Twitch videos, and there were VHSs. And like, we were just watching Twitch and Liquid Lifestyle, Scott Lindgren's on repeat all day, every day. Oh yeah, and Wicked Liquid with Fisher and Zambezi. It was so freaking epic and so massive to watch all this stuff and just see where this has all gone. We don't even see the lines. We don't even know how they're doing what they're doing. But we're like, yeah, we totally could do this off a roof or something like that. So let's just start like, this is 1999, and we got the URL and learned HTML5 or something. I don't know what it was at the time, and just started like trying to code. And we made and like we made videos. I don't know how we hosted the videos. I think it was on AOL. And so Huckin Huge started in like 1999, and we were coding and doing all this wild stuff, but it was just basically like a way to like motivate us and emulate these heroes of ours, watching these people do all this stuff, and we were just watching these videos all day, every day, burning out the VHSs. And
what kind of camera did you have for taking that?
Man, stuff? It was like, I'm sorry, it's like a something high 8, or I don't think DV had come out. I think it was like a DV cassette. I don't know. It was definitely a cassette.
But it was a tape, one of those little mini. Yeah, I'm trying to remember what those are too, but I think I know what you're talking about. Just a little camcorder that's like little, yeah.
It was epic. And then, like, of course, like during those times, like, kayaking videos and documentaries and all this has gone a long way, where there's some substance and stories to it. Back then, it was just like, how cool of a song could you pick out and just like throw clips on it? It was so rad. It was like, dude, that drop like fit perfectly with this one part in the song, and it was like, okay, that's rad. Gave us all goosebumps. We're going to throw it up on Huckin Huge. And like, we just name it Huckin Huge as like these pool boaters in Arizona who are like trying everything and anything to get, our whitewater fixed back then. And so I go to the Marine Corps, and my brother Bradt Howard had kept it alive when I was in the Marine Corps.
Oh, nice.
And that fucker went out and got sponsored by Riot Kayaks.
Oh, yeah.
And I heard this in Iraq. I was like, he like wrote me like kind of like a little brag letter, like, dude, I'm sponsored by Riot. And I think he got in, like, the disco had just come out, and he like got a disco, and maybe we had a glide and all this. We were ride junkies, man. Like, I thought they were the coolest dudes out there like doing just wild stuff,
Yeah.
Like I remember seeing someone throw
Before
like
my time, but the Riot Band was legendary for sure.
bro, it was
Yeah.
epic. And like, free wheels or back wheels off of Mamquam. And like if someone broke their back on that, it was like the end of free wheels off of those. Now all of a sudden, it's like free wheels and kick flips and stuff are off big drops all the time. It's kind of what you do. But
Yeah.
like it was massive. And so Bradt got sponsored by Riot. So I think that added a little bit of fuel to the fire of the competitive older brother to like get back into it.
I'll bet.
And so, I get back from the Marine Corps and start kayaking. And then it was like, I don't know how I'm going to make, just basically beer money or food money. It's like, just squeak it on by, let alone gas, and get the hell out of Phoenix and like go kayaking and do all this stuff. And it was like starting from scratch again. Bradt was in an epic career, doing his stuff. And so basically I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go try this. And I met this cat out of Phoenix, and his name was Mike Fisher. And Mike Fisher, he was from Cave Creek, and he was just as wild as me, man. And so like he and I
love this. I love this because I was, before this interview, I was trying, because it's been a long time since I've looked at any of your videos and stuff.
Sure.
And I was just looking what I could find. And I was like, yeah, I remember there was this one guy that used to kayak with him. I can't remember his name, but he was always like on the carnage reel.
Dude, Mike.
And it was that
yes.
dude, Mike Fisher. Yeah.
What's up, Mike? I hope you're listening to this, dude. Like, if Mike, you're out there, you crazy motherfucker. And he was always just like down to send it. And it was cool because like, I mean, he's quite a few years younger than me too. I think he was like barely just turned 18.
Mm-hmm.
He's out of the house and all that. And he's like, I'm 23, back from the Marine Corps, back from combat. It was me and Mike Fisher. We're like, yo, we are pros and we are going to go do everything. And we're going to take over. We're going to take back over Huckin Huge from Bradt, and like, that's it. Like literally like one night just sitting there, like 2 weeks back from the Marine Corps, I was like, that's it. That's what we're going to do. And
awesome.
it was, I mean, like, goddamn, like the amount of like, just like hard knocks that then followed was unfreaking believable. And basically he and I just started tearing up everything that we could find around here in the desert. And, I sat out here in Arizona through 2007, and then 2008 hit, and we had a hell of a spring. And basically, I should rewind a little bit for kayaking in Arizona history. Is that when I was in the Marine Corps, my brother Bradt, Tyler Williams, Mark Reed, and Roy Lipman, and one other guy, Hut Wade, they all attempted the first ascent of Christopher Creek.
Yeah.
And
I thought you were on that. I didn't realize it was your brother that was on that.
Dude, I was pulling triggers in Iraq. I was like hearing all about that. And so like then my brother wrote me and he was like, damn, dude, you know what? Because I wrote him this letter that Jim McComb, and I'm going to go, this is all over the place. So we're all going to come back to this, but Jim had told me, he was like, you are dumb enough and young enough to maybe go do these things and maybe kayaking. And he was wise, dude. He was like, yeah, kayaking's going to get to this point where you could probably run a Christopher Creek. And he just gave me like this freaking spreadsheet of stuff I should hit. Amazing. And so it was like, yeah, Bradt, I'm going off to war. Check out Christopher Creek. Love Cody. And so but Tyler Williams, all these other adults all had like their eyes set on it for sure. And Roy, who's he's a epic firefighter in Flagstaff, he had gone off the 4th or 5th drop, which is now called Roy's Smiles of Trials. And it's just like, of course, when rivers are running in Arizona, it's probably a shitty time of the day, it's just like pouring and everything. And the rivers are typically running like with epic sediment and epic brown to where like, it's not whitewater, dude. It's like, you can't even tell. It's hard to even tell the backwash of a hole. When you have a nice crystal clear California, Colorado river, you can see the backwash of the whitewater, but like with brown mud, it's like, yeah, it's sucking hard, but I don't really know where that ends and stops. And of course you can't tell how deep this is. So it's a perfect looking 10 footer or some 15 footer. and just roosted off of it like anybody would. And it was on to like, inches of water and a big, huge basalt shelf, and put his foot, I believe what Bradt described to me is put his foot through and over the bulkhead, the foot brace in the bulkhead, and like had his like ankle twisted up by the front grab loop. And they had to like gingerly undo his bulkhead to get it out in like a major extraction mission. And then of course, like, so stoked that, like he's doing fine today, and he's still paddling for years after that. But, right afterwards, damn Colorado boaters came on down here, and I think it was Todd Gilman, McCutcheon, and Stafford. They did the completion of Christopher Creek, which is just awesome. It's like, I don't think anybody in that crew would have even run what was left in the creek anyways. Like Big Lebowski and all that stuff like that is probably, maybe Bradt, I don't know, but like they went big, man, and it probably opened up another epic creek. And so
they put it front and center in their guidebook too, just so they could remind you of it constantly.
Dude, I'll tell you what, it was like, the Colorado boaters, and then it just like, oh, they're coming on down here. But it was so cool because it was like finally someone who boats more than like 6 days a year, like you would learn so much, and it was just in awe of just even how they were strapping boats to their roof. It's like learning like, wow, that's amazing. And, like doing all that type of stuff. But so fast forward, I'm out of the Marine Corps, and we're like, it's epic season. All of a sudden, just a great season, huge season, and don't have a job. I declared myself, I'm going to just go kayaking and figure it all out from there. And this is going to be my transition. And you know what? It just took over, and Mike was on board for the ride, and me and Mike Fisher were just sending things all over the place. And Jim McComb was giving us like little tips and tricks and what we should check out. And Tyler Williams is like, adding a little bit of beta and all this type of stuff. And none of the guidebooks were really out, and we were just kind of flying by night and exploring a little bit, maybe into the lower reaches of Colorado, some California. We got as high as like the Kauai drainages, but then we'd get back down in the Southwest, and there'd be something epic to do, and no one had done them. And it was just like a free for all. And so this life that I just lived as a combat Marine into now just a vagabond, kayaker in the Southwest alone with Mike, it was a seamless transition. And we learned a lot together out on those rivers, getting beat up really hard. And, I then moved up to,
can you give us one of the more epic missions you went on?
Oh my gosh. So you know what, like back to a lot of the stuff's illegal. Can't really say where or what, but it's in Arizona. It's on a res, and basically like just the put-ins of some of these. This is pre-spot satellites and all that type of stuff, and rescue equipment, and even cell phone coverage. We're just like doing these wild put-ins, and I'd seen in the movies. I think like, have you ever seen Into the Wild? The movie Into the Wild, where he's just sitting in his car late at night and just a flood happens. I was like, oh, fucking Hollywood. That never happens. Dude, I experienced that. Like literally, like, we're perched on this little arroyo waiting for the water in the middle of the night, and just all of a sudden, like a wall of water lifting the truck.
Whoa.
type situation. Like, it was out of control. So stuff to like near misses like that, to just overnighted, endless overnights, multiple overnights, just unprepared, don't know what we're doing, dropping into canyons that have never been done with like no gear, no nothing, just like, hey, we'll figure it out. And and it was trial by fire for sure. But thankfully no one got seriously hurt. There's a few bruises and bangs and near misses, and a lot of learning and a lot of river safety. And so I having had that experience with Ryan Palmer in Missoula, I quickly recognized that and there was all these reports every year of just like casualties and fatalities on the river. It was very apparent to me that like this was not something to just loosey goosey be about. It was
especially at that time, when the limits were definitely being pushed pretty hard.
It was. And it was, that was kind of yeah, that was like the highlight of it. And so like we're finding out these limits and,
Were you kind
yeah,
of refining your skills each time you did it? Like, oh, we should have had a rope on that last one. This time, this next mission, I'm going to bring a rope, or
no,
did
so
that
I'd
take
say,
more time?
yeah, no, actually, you know what? It only took like a trip or two before like we were very safety conscious of everything. And it was like, it just got to the point where like we then started dialing back on what we thought was runnable.
Hmm.
Like, we ran some dumb things and it was like, dude, we're not ready for that type of stuff. And thankfully, like we had that little nugget of wisdom from the universe, like, maybe you should just relax. And so we were then like, okay, let's reset and work our way up to like maybe what could be the limits of these runnable falls.
Hmm.
And then like maybe, even dreaming like, does Arizona even have water that big and waterfalls and creeks that cool to go run? And, we, kind of split ways. And after a little bit, Mike had to go to school or something like that. And I moved up to Bellingham, Washington
Hmm.
in the Pacific Northwest and started
The
kayaking.
opposite of the dry state. Yeah.
Yeah. Another epic winter, another reality check.
I'll bet.
And going up into BC and kayaking on the BC rivers and all that type of stuff was like, oh yeah, well, this is what water feels like. And
Yeah.
this is like,
Real class 5, huh? Yeah.
oh, dude, like really big stuff. And like, I remember one of the biggest moments. I mean, I think it was like at the time, the biggest water I'd ever run was the Fear Canyon of the Elaho or Elaho. And I think we were like at like 350 cubics. And it was just freaking massive.
Huge
And
water.
it was like, when water gets that big, like, you just kind of boof and eddy. And you learn like the boost stroke is also applicable on like flat water or just in wave trains or just like trying to break through seams. And it was just
Mhm.
like you land off the boost stroke and it was just like solid liquid cement underneath your boat. It
Hmm.
was like just thick liquid cement of just epic water going underneath you. I was like, wow, that's a new feeling.
Hmm.
Like I didn't experience that in those lower SoCal creeks and Arizona creeks and all that stuff. This is big fucking water. And then there was a new challenge, like all that big water stuff too.
Yeah, that's cool that you started to get into that, because I definitely like see. I think my first awareness of what you were doing was a lot of the Arizona stuff that you were putting out, and it was like, I mean, it was cool because I'd never heard of anyone really kayaking in Arizona, even though obviously it was happening before you. But seeing some of those gorges, which are just like so unique,
Yeah.
but they are. I mean, I don't want to say they're low volume, because sometimes you can get some water in those places, but it's definitely like lower volume creeking for the most part, and sometimes pushing it down to the lower limits of that. And I don't know. I think of like, not that I want to derail the conversation, but some people were criticizing people around that time of like, oh yeah, they're just boating these waterfalls, doesn't take any skill, you just kind of plop off of them.
Yep.
But
Yep.
I think that you and many other people like kind of have proved, I think, that once you go into that big water environment, you can translate those skills. I'm sure it took a little transition, but you can.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. And you know what? It's that Florida surfer analogy again.
There you go.
I didn't give a fuck. Like, there was definitely like, we're like putting out stuff on Huckin Huge. Again, I don't know where we were hosting these videos. And we were even dreaming about maybe even like getting a DVD out there and doing all that type of stuff. And then you hear the criticism a little bit and it's like low water. It's like, I don't even care. Like I'll boat anything as low as it goes, dude. I'm from Arizona. Like if there's even a trickle from it, I grew up like putting the garden hose off the high dive. Like, dude, it's like, it doesn't matter, man. It's just cool. And like,
Yeah.
the canyons are the cool part. Like,
Yeah.
all that type of stuff. Like I just go through boats all the time, bashing boats and learning all this
I'll
wild
bet.
stuff. And like, you'd meet boaters from other areas of the country that are just fortunate to have, epic water. And they're just like, a fair weather surfer almost like, it's not offshore. It's not perfect. It's not breaking overhead high. I'm not going out. I'm like, dude,
Yeah.
I'm going out. It's like ankle slappers slop, like, I don't
This is
care.
way better than my roof. Come on.
For sure. For sure. So like, it was like that. You hear all that in the background, it's like, oh yeah, but then like you'd hear like there was a lot of that like plop and drop stuff, and it was like, man, I would just love to be able to learn just to how to perfect the plop and drop, let
Control your angle
alone,
and all that. Yeah.
and that type of stuff. Like that's the criticism side and all that type of stuff. Like, just finding that little nugget of like motivation was like, whatever. I'm just going to figure out how to dial this thing. And, it's night and day from low water, steep creek into big water, but like the fear and the adrenaline and like the lessons learned are both the same, And it's like, I'm going to crack the shit out of my elbow on that drop when I run this at super low water, or that hole is going to eat me alive, And it was like, it definitely had, the river teaches. It doesn't matter if that river is running at like 100 CFS or like 15,000 Stikine, It's like, who gives a shit? It's going to teach you a lesson no matter what. And like, I would tread into these sacred spots with that in the background. Just like, what, don't get complacent, And I was definitely like, as we went out the gates of Fallujah and like the Humvees without a top, without doors, going into combat, the last fucking sign before the gates was complacency kills. And that's it. And that was just a Marine coup. And then on the other side of the gate, coming back in, is welcome to Camp Fallujah. So it's like, goddamn. But as you go out, it's like complacency kills. And, it's like, okay, so you know what? We're getting on the river. Don't get squirrely. Yeah. And, I'd say that like that was one criticism for sure back in those days when I was going super hard, was like, some of the people I was rolling with, it was like they were just cool outdoorsmen and experienced boaters, and then here comes this Marine Corps energy. And I'm like, let's go, like all this type of stuff and safety and, just a little bit like, let's get the shot, let's fire it up, let's go to the next drop, let's go to this, and motivated as hell, let's go see the world and all that. And so, it was like, it takes a specific crew, you got to have the go-getters to go get it. And I kind of fell in there with like a really go-getter crew, whether it be up in the Pacific Northwest and California, up in BC. And it was just fun, like, because, kayakers, they all kind of like figure out where they're supposed to be.
Yeah. Because it seems like you were more drawn to not just like, hey, let's go run some laps on the Little White, which I'm sure you did. But you were really like, what else is out there? What's the mission that no one else has done? Let's go do that. I definitely get that impression from you, right? And I'm sure that's the team dynamics come way more into play when you get into that kind of game.
Totally. And it's just like endless. I was just always motivated by like, the Ben Stewksbury's and Lindgrens and everybody getting out there and doing these like, not Nepal, but just like figuring out like even underneath everybody's noses, like what has no one looked at, or like maybe it's even too low to do, but it ain't too low for me. Let's just go try to scrape down this thing. And like, hey, we found some real dogs and we found some real winners. Yeah. And it was kind of fun, but it was like that of like exploratory stuff was cool. And then we come back and of course, like you get on just like the glorious Little White or the Skykomish or up in, the Nooksack out in Bellingham. Shout out to the Bellingham crew. Like, dude, there are some like sleeper epic, rivers that are running around the clock that in the Pacific Northwest was changing every single spring. There'd be some new boulder that moved or some new wood. And so it was like complacency kills. Like we'd always kind of have these new lines to learn and like you use it as a training ground and then go out and go kind of, ramble, young man, ramble, like go find out what's next out there. And like, is there anything cool? And and then along the way, like meeting these epic heroes of mine, and getting to paddle with them. I remember, I was, pretty well into the kayaking and Huckin Huge was going off. Right. And so what was going on, we would, I landed an awesome deal with Ken Whiting and Heliconia Press. Okay. And Ken Whiting had gotten me into REIs, and I made my first video, which was the Risen Sun. Wow. And dude, I'm like in REIs across the country, and it'd be impressive. Like, there's the Risen Sun. It was dope. It was crazy. Yeah. And then fucking YouTube happened, and it was like a light switch. It was like a light switch. It was amazing, man. It was crazy, and like It didn't take the love out of editing videos, man, because I'd stay up all night long, finding like the perfect songs, perfect mix, doing all this type of stuff, licensing. I learned a lot of all this, and making these kayaking videos, and then seeing YouTube come along, it's just like dead stop.
Yeah,
Dead
the
stop.
dark side of YouTube for sure.
Yeah.
What
But
what do you think was the prime motivator for you to do all the media stuff? Because I mean, that takes like that's another level on top of, there's lots, I'm not gonna say there's lots of people, but it's one thing to go around and boat, but it takes a lot of effort to like stop, get out there, like take footage of all this stuff and then go. And like you said, man, that's a lot of work to edit all of that and like put it into something coherent. Like what was it a financial driver, or were there other things that were really driving you?
not at all. And I not at all financially, because I mean, like, financially actually it's pretty epic for a second. For like a second, we were making like
till YouTube.
Like $1 DVDs, and then they'd sell for 30, but like the distribution deal, like they're taking like a classic distribution deal takes like 80%. It's like you don't make anything on that. But as a kayaker, it was like, dude, we can continue just to travel around and boat. So this is awesome. Let's do it. Girlfriends don't stick around. There's no hope of any solid roots or anything like that. But like what the real fun and like goosebumps and like aha moments was just like reviewing all this, almost like and I didn't play football, I played hockey, but like like going back and like reviewing the tapes. It was like, man, what an epic time, what an epic moment. Like it was just like, and also it was like, now put this story and these videos to music and maybe a little bit of story back in those days. And it was more of a creative process too. And I really was drawn to that creative process. I just loved it. And, still do a lot of creative things today. It's kind of always been Cody, whether it's like making forts or making art or making movies or making something, it was always some sort of creative thing. And
it was a way to extend the enjoyment. So
it was for sure. And then, Discovery Communications came across and pitched to me for the military channel. And, so Discovery owns a big umbrella of different networks and channels. And so they just say like, hey, Cody, here's some money, a bunch of money, and go out and go make a TV show. And
did they find you from the Huckin Huge stuff, or how did they?
Yeah, the Huckin Huge definitely did. But basically like the military channel had this big, huge sponsorship lingering over them. And Miller High Life was giving, I think it was actually like pretty substantial. I think it was like 2 cents for every bottle cap somebody turned in to veterans.
Oh, wow.
And so, you pound a 12 pack and you get 24 cents, it's like, but that adds up across the nation. And it was like, Discovery wanted to promote this. And so like, it was like, okay, this is perfect. And so like, we had this sponsorship deal with Miller High Life, and Discovery Communications could cross that advertisement off their list and like have military channel. And here's this kayaker. And like, I was like, yeah, this transition that I had out of the military to kayaking has helped out so much. Maybe I could help out other veterans. And so what we ended up doing is producing an hour-long TV show, a one-off, as they called it, as I learned, and basically took veterans down a river, down the Salt, and the Salt was at 3,600. But dude, it was like I taught them 2 weeks earlier how to roll. I'm like, yeah, you're fine, just come out with me. And there would be like, my boy Nick, he's amputee below the knee, and fitting in the kayak, and of course he's swimming like the first rapid, but there would be like a prosthetic leg floating next to his paddle, floating next to his kayak, floating next to Nick, can't kick to the shore. And I'm like, dude, this is huge. This is massive. And we had a lot of fun shooting it. We got in all the plugs for Miller High Life, like we're sitting around the campfire, like labels got to be facing, all this type of stuff. And like, we got all that. And then like what happened was the reality of like, now you're fucking around with like Discovery and the military channel. Like, this isn't just a kayaking video. Like, it needs to be transcribed into 72 languages for subtitles. There needs to be commercial breaks, all this type of stuff. And that kind of sucked the creativity out of it. And I was like, yeah, I've kind of seen where this could go in the video production world. Shout out to like Rush Sturges and all those boys up there with Riverroots making it, because they're creative as fuck and can navigate those waters with like seamlessly beautiful things. But like it was like, just even just licensing music for this type of deal was a chore, and we spent a year on it, and it was pretty huge. But that was really kind of like the ultimate summit of this media, I would say, was when we put out that.
Are you glad that you did have that experience though?
Super glad, because like, dude, I met this, so I had a budget and I didn't pay myself anything, because I soon learned that like, you know, just getting your audio, like, you know, as we're talking right now on the podcast, I think you just muted your camera. You had to mute out the cough, right? But like, you gotta, yeah, but like just on, I caught you, but like, you know, like you, just the spit in someone's voice, they have to scrub that out, and it costs thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And I was like, holy crap, this is just crazy. It was a massive, you know, undertaking just to produce like an hour-long show is actually like 42 minutes of content, and then stories and all that type of stuff. So it was like it was all consuming, and Barney Benito and all these. So I had a budget. I was derailing there for a second, but I had a budget, but I got to hire on some incredible talent. So Barney Benito, he was living up in White Salmon and Hood River, epic, talented, huge class 5 boater, awesome cinematographer, you know, like, and then I started hiring on here in Phoenix, all the news camera anchors, you know, and these guys were like in the helicopter shooting traffic. And I was like, yo, come on the river with me, kayak, and then you'll sit in the raft and I'll put you up on a cliff and you can shoot us kayaking. And we were all about
cool
it.
To have those resources. Yeah.
It was sweet. And so, you know, I pretty much bought some of the good friends in my life now through this video, because we all connected on this, and it was pretty sweet. We spent, I think it was 3 days, did a through trip, got it all done, and a lot of carnage and some awesome stories. And it's floating around out there somewhere. I don't know if it's on the internet. This is like in 2009, 2010 timeframe. But
have to do some Google searching afterwards, see if we can pull it up.
It's called Coming Home: Redemption on the Water. It kicked my butt. I just sit back and like edit little kayak videos, and then like doing a TV show for Discovery Communications. That was an ass kicker. It was just a keen of all of media. And, you know, but also like, again, looking back, a lot of the drive for this content was just how I learned how to paddle, which was, you know, through watching like Twitch and, you know, Liquid Lifestyles and all Lindgren stuff. And then, of course, like out there during this time frame, like the early 2000s, early aughts, you know, is like the Young Guns, and Rush was just killing it, just like epic stuff. And like, you know, being able to meet my heroes and all those dudes, you know, it's so cool. Super fun.
Yeah. So through all this period, was that just kind of where you were at? You were just like, hey, I just want to go out there, be the best kayaker I have, share whatever I can on video, and just have that experience.
Yep. And it really didn't. And like, getting out, and I'm not in the, you know, the expedition class 5 community right now. And like, you know, I haven't been out on a mission, quote unquote, for a long time. But I'm watching all the content. I'm out there creeping it often. And I'm looking at it. I'm like, dude, these guys are flying through some of these runs often, you know, and like hustling through it. Where like back then, I feel like a little bit slower pace was more acceptable. Where like today, I wonder, like, is there much tolerance for a shore camera, or is it just GoPro and go, man? We got to go, like the next trip, you know, like, is there like much of a tolerance for people getting out and like, you know, setting up the camera and getting the shot?
In some ways, the GoPro is kind of like had some negative effects like that, I think. And plus, I think that's been a way people have tried to start pushing the limits more, right? Like, let's do this run that's been run, but let's do it higher. And how fast can we do it? How many laps can we do, right? Like, that's been a way of pushing the edge for sure.
Yeah. Where I loved, there was a California crew. So I ended up moving to Auburn, and Auburn, California, right there on the American rivers. And there's a crew, and they're like, we'd just gotten off the Middle Kings, and they went in after us, and they're like, we're going to see. And Tommy Hilke and John Grace had just done the first one-day descent. Again, I barely made it over the pass. I was like, I'm not ready for this. And like, it was a massive trip for me. And then to have John Grace and Tommy Hokie come down and do the hike and the run in one day, it was mind blowing. But I just love, there was this crew in Auburn, California, like, we're going to see how slow we can do it. And I think they did like 9-day descent of the Mill Kings. And it was just like, fuck yeah, dudes. Fuck yeah. This is awesome. And they sat at Tahiti Dome for like 2 days. And it was like, I think they even did the Devil's Post Pile, and they did Devil's Post Pile, and like got the Crucible and just sat there for like a day in the Crucible. It was just like, yeah, it's a spectrum, you got all these different
I think
loves of the river.
there's room for both, right? But
Totally.
you remind me of like Rolf Kelly, who's on, one of my earlier, the
I
tubing
paddled with
sensation,
Rolf for
tubing
sure.
sensation, Rolf Kelly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did a great old podcast with him, but he's a great guy. He lives in Denver. But yeah, he was talking about that in California, how it's sort of like all the locals, they're just like, it's their home run, and they're just like, yeah, let's just fire through it. And, he's like, I go out there, I want to spend time out there. I want to, enjoy it, take a few days. And
Yeah. And so, I was definitely not on the crew that was doing as fast as possible. And I definitely was not on the crew of like, let's see how slow and how much we can enjoy this river. I was somewhere in between. Just, your typical, like, if the Stikine takes, 2 days, 3 days, I'm on the 2 day, 3 day trip. Or if like, the Upper Cherry takes 3 days, I'm on the 3 day trip and that type of stuff.
yeah. What do you, what's like your most, what accomplishment are you most proud of during that period?
Man, I wonder, a lot of personal accomplishments for sure. I definitely feel like I somehow, some way, intuitively figured out how to transition from civilian life. And it wasn't like kayaking as a tool. It's just like kayaking taught me that. And the kayaking community taught me so much, it was like this sense of peace and coolness and just like wealth of knowledge and way to communicate in like a, more slow, effective way, was huge. And so that was massive. But then also like, as far as just like, I love the fact that I got out and got to explore, not just because all the footage was out there of like all the stuff that you could do. But I wasn't like reviewing the tapes. I was like, dude, let's go out and go try to find new runs. And so like new runs, new heights, new limits, or just like, I look back on the career of that, and if you want to call it one, it was like, dude, that was like a real gift. It was like super cool because also in my backyard here in Phoenix, it was like, we just had, the target was huge. You could throw the dart behind your head and hit bullseye every time, it was just like something that hadn't been run and was going to be a mission.
Sure.
Yeah. And then, like it got taken to incredible heights too. I was, I'll never forget, I was living in Hood River. I think that was my storage shed days outside of Theo Berman's house. And I was rolling around with Tyler Bradt, Rush Sturgis, and all those guys. Boomer, fucking me and Boomer, dude. I love Boomer, man. I remember Boomer and I just wrestling nonstop because Boomer's got that type of vibe. And I was definitely out of the Marine Corps. I was like, yo, let's go. And
he was a wrestler, right? He was.
Oh yeah, he's a wrestler. It was awesome, dude. And shout out to Boomer because like I remember like, it was like cool. Like, let's go find out these new limits and looking at like Rattlesnake Falls. I think just recently got done in the past couple of years. It was like, yeah, that's huge. Yeah. And like figuring out, like lapping Metlaco and doing all these bigger laps. And then Paul Gamache and I were up in BC and he ran, what ended up for a brief moment being a world record drop. And then all of a sudden it was like, I find myself on the Today Show next to Ben Stooksbury and Pedro after they just done, I think it was called like, not Anaconda, but Salta Bayo.
The thing in Brazil.
In Brazil where he ended up like upside down. I was like, yeah, that's not how you want to do a waterfall. It was a big drama. Ben called me after the interview, like literally, this is like back in the day, it wasn't like live streaming on your phone or anything. I don't think the iPhones were out, but it was like, I found a connection. I was like, wow, that's crazy. And then we talked to each other. I was like, yo, there's no beef, right? And I was like, no. It was like, oh, that's cool. Whatever. And we went back boating the next day, because it was definitely like on national television type shit. And then it got taken to, I get this call from Tyler Brandt. He's like, dude, we're getting everybody in the area, and we're all getting together, and we're going to go to Palouse. And it was like, fuck yeah, you know? And it was like some of those moments, man, there were some peak adventure moments where it's like, you know, it's like I'm sitting down in the eddy, not in the eddy, fuck the eddy. It was the pool, and the pool is like just epic of Palouse Falls. It's me and Ian Garcia in the pool, and you don't even hear the fucking whistles of like, you know, Tyler going off. And it was just like, you know, Stewksbury's on the cliff, like everybody, Sturgis over there, everyone's all around, all the safety's all set, big crew. And then me and Ian are just battling these like 4 to 5 foot waves and just fucking epic mist from Palouse Falls. And you feel like you're close, but I'm looking at the video and we're like across the pool. Like we're not even, we're near incredible. The waterfall, but you feel like you're right there in front of the falls. And we look up and there comes Tyler. And it was like, yeah, man, for a moment, I mean, like, you know, the previous world record before that was like, you know, what, in the 120s. Yeah. And we're staring at the beast of like a 180 plus fall. And
it was great. He just shut down all the controversy, right?
Bro, like, that was it. That was it. And it's over
to this day too.
Yeah. And that was one of those moments. And because I'll never forget, like, it's me and Ian. And
yeah, what did you think? What did you think when you got the call for that and looked at it? Yeah. Like, had you ever looked at that waterfall before you?
I had never seen it until I got that call. Yeah, I instantly Google imaged it and all that type of stuff and saw what we were talking about, and it's there for sure. But I was like, you know, at that time, like we were just kind of cruising around from drops to drops to drops, checking out Rattlesnake, checking out this, running together, doing media. You know, I think. Sturgis we just done some trip to Celestial Falls, and you throwing some Hail Mary off the Celestial Falls. It was awesome. And, you know, I was doing a lot of video, so it was kind of like a dual component. Like, you know, I was like out there charging, but also I could take the video too.
Yeah.
And so I thought I was just going to be on video team, and we all kind of sat around. I think there was like 9 of us, and we all kind of sat around and we're like, Tyler was like, I'm going to get to the lip and I'm probably going to run it. And then we all sat there and I was like, okay. And it was like in this awesome fashion, like, you know, everybody, I forget who kind of took control, but everybody instantly kind of knew their roles. And it was like, yo, you know what, Cody, you and Ian are going to be in the bottom in case we need to pull somebody out. And, you know, like it was a pretty powerful like role to be put in. Yeah. I'm like, yo, I thought I was going to be hanging off the edge of the cliff, just getting rolling tape, you know, and right. Now I'm like responsible of like, we don't know where this drop is going to go or like what's going to happen to Tyler. Tyler's fully capable of it, but dude, this drop is insane. So
yeah,
like,
I mean, how are you feeling about it as it was getting set up? Were you kind of like, I don't know if this is a good idea, or were you looking at it and thinking like, hey, this does look like it goes? But what was your feeling?
Yeah, I was completely just, to be honest with you, I was just like, I was only looking at what I had to do. I was only like,
thinking about it.
I wasn't even thinking about it. And getting down to the pool was such a bitch because it's like this huge.
I've looked at it before at low water. Yeah. I've been there. Yeah.
Have you scaled down to the pool below?
No, I didn't go down to the bottom. We just kind of walked around the rim and stuff.
Yeah. I remember it being just wild, and especially with the boat, it was like lowering and all this type of stuff. And so by the time we get down there and like, I was like, is this even going to happen? And the amount of media and everybody around, I was like, okay, I'm just like, you snap into just like, you know, I am here for this. And that was how it went down. But I'll never forget, see him go over the lip, and then he just disappears into the fold and just falling. And then, you know, I'm seeing firsthand at river level, what's behind the waterfall on river left is just cave to massive monster proportions, just a huge fucking cave. And it was like, okay, so that's the obvious, and I don't even know how. We can't even get close to the waterfall, let alone I don't know how somebody's going to get out of there. And we see Tyler go over, and me and Ian start paddling, and I just hear screaming, and it's echoing down that teacup, that, you know, supersized teacup down into the pool. And now I didn't hear the whistles, but now I'm hearing just like, like screaming, echoing off the walls. And I was like, oh, fuck, there's somebody hurt and I thought it was Tyler back behind the falls. And, this is all happening in seconds, but it felt like an eternity.
About.
And Tyler's there. He rolls up, and those screams were just people cheering because they had already seen him in the froth of the whitewater from the bird's eye view of the cliffs above. And me and Ian are getting pounded out there, just like, where is he? Where is he? Where is he? Dude, big hugs in the thing. And it's one of those moments where you look and you just know when it was like Palouse, it was like, yeah, there might be a waterfall out there that goes, and there's certainly the talent that could do it, but like, will it all line up? I don't know if that's it. That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, that was an amazing accomplishment. That's cool to hear your rendition of it. I guess like we probably should have at the outset. Most people probably know, but this was still the world record in terms of height waterfall run out in Eastern Washington, the Palouse Falls. It's a pretty amazing accomplishment.
It is huge. And I think, Tyler's boy, Dan, I think he was working for NASA at the time. He put in like an accelerometer between Tyler's feet, and Tyler had come up with a system because like the biggest thing was that cave. I'm like, fuck that cave. And like, how am I going to not blow out my skirt? I mean, dude, we blow out our skirts on like, 30 footers. And it's like, he had this like PVC pipe contraption where like he cut the PVC pipe in half and it like looped over the skirt and the rim of the cockpit and like just strapped himself in. Like, dude, commitment to another level. Like, props to Tyler. He's like, the skirt is staying on. And like, you gotta be conscious to take that thing off. It was pretty hardcore. And then like Dan had an accelerometer in between his legs, I think was the story, if I remember correctly, to measure like the G forces, not of acceleration, but like the G forces of how fast Tyler stopped. And if I remember correctly, so like what was his deceleration? And I think it was like, I don't know, a G, 2 Gs, 3 Gs or something like that. Wow. Like it registered. Wow. Like his deceleration.
Yeah, amazing that not only he did it, but he like kept his skirt on, stayed in his boat. I think he kept his paddle too, didn't he?
Kept his paddle. I think he knocked his paddle, and then like, massive cheers, big hugs. And then me, Tyler, and Ian had to paddle out. And we're just in this like class 1 ripples below Palouse Falls for quite a few miles. And it was like, I don't know if anybody out there, everybody listening, kayakers, you get one of those big moments. It was just kind of like, you're in another planet. You're just floating, literally and physically, no pun intended. We're just floating, can't believe what just happened and how it all happened and all went so well. But like, there's like moments like that all the way to just like, really honestly, like just finding like some obscure waterfall in Arizona. Like just like a perfect clean waterfall that you grew up dreaming about. And there it is. And, the water's running. And like, in the Southwest, when there's water running, like, it's terrible conditions, of course, but like you feel that the animals, the riverbanks, the water, the life is just vibrating because it's like a fleeting moment of water out here in the desert. Like, just the creosote bushes are just vibrating. Like everything knows, like, this is it. There may not be another one for 2 years,
Yeah. The elusiveness of it, the temporariness of it must be, I think that definitely adds a unique dimension to it.
Yeah. So there was all these like little milestones and notes along the kayaking time. And then, just traveling with Huckin Huge, like, getting over to Japan.
Yeah, and tell me a little about Japan. How did that? Because that's not your like typical kayaking destination,
right?
But I know some people have explored it a little bit. How'd that come about?
Yeah, we just were like, we should. We were filming the first video. We were filming the Risen Sun. We're like, what would be like a cool exotic destination? And it was like, I don't know, Mexico is dope. There's like all this cool stuff and yada yada yada. But it was like, I don't know who had it. It was either me or Mike Fisher, but somebody sent an email with a photo of just this like super low volume, classic Huckin Huge looking drop in like this slippery little black granite little bowl into a teacup of like, aqua blue waters, just with like, the perfect like Japanese foliage around it. And I was like, oh, well, now we're doing this. And, no plans, no nothing, just, and again, this is back in the day, how all really hadn't been mapped out. And we got over there and it was like, okay, we do know that there is this awesome town called Minakami, and there's Mike Harris, who's a Kiwi, owns a rafting company, adventure company, canyoneering company called Canyons Japan. And Canyons Japan, it was like, dude, we just go there and figure this out. And we went there and we started kayaking. We were like, yeah, the big river in town was fun. It was cool. It's super rad. But like what we were really there for was like all their canyoneering looked so rad. We could kayak these canyoneering. I mean, it's like 50 CFS, but it was like 60-foot waterfalls.
Really?
And, like,
and they were clean enough that you could do them with low water, huh?
Epic clean. And, what they were doing is that some of these people were like cliff jumping them and sliding down them. And then, we started branching out, and my boy Lincoln Taylor started taking, and he lives out there. He works for Canyons, and he's the adventure stud, and he started showing us. And then we made it down into Gamma Prefecture, and it was, we met Yoshi, and Yoshi owns a kayaking school down there, and he started showing us stuff. And so we started putting all these pieces together, and hadn't even scratched the map, scratched the surface of what's possible out there. And we ended up doing a second trip with Ryan Knight, Darren McCoy, everybody all loaded up, and we did a second trip out there and explored more, and got into trouble. And God bless the Japanese. They are the friendliest, kindest, most tolerant hosts you can possibly ask for, because as kayakers show up after a huge day, we aren't the most polite, presentable bunch, and like it's you walk into a Japanese house, you take off your shoes and you sit on the floor next to the family table, and so there's kayakers with like Tevas and 510s and shit hanging everywhere and leaning against a wall. And it was like,
I can imagine. Yeah, it's like everything's. I've been there, not to kayak, but I've been there. I've been to Japan, and yeah, it's exactly how you say, right? Everything's so organized and generally neat, and I can see kayakers just being the antithesis of the Japanese sort of lifestyle. But they're fortunately very, very like tolerant of Westerners behaving like Westerners, like.
Big time. And then
I feel like a lot of them, they just laugh, right? There's like, they
just laugh because like we'd come out there. It was terrible. We'd go out there and like we wouldn't have money for these hotels, and the hotels in Tokyo. I mean, like I remember seeing a parking lot for $299 a day, and this is like in 2009.
That's
I was
insane.
Like 24 hours for parking is $300, like insane prices, right? And we're not even on like the $60 a night hotel budget. So we were just camping in people's front yards, and they would come out, walk past the tent and get the mail, and then kind of like wave and like, politely just ask us like, do we need anything? And when are we going to leave?
Wait, these are people that you got permission to camp in their yards?
No,
or you were just
like,
tent? Like, really? You're just like, hey, this is a good yard.
There was like a wide enough pullout at like 12 o'clock at night. And like that wide enough pullout happened to be like someone's like loop around driveway in their like front yard, multiple times, and it was like, I would not.
That wouldn't fly in the US, would it?
Hell no, man. You'd be woken up by a sheriff in like at 2 a.m. Like, I mean, but like, it was just a quiet, silent morning, and we weren't there long. We were already going to the next thing. And, on our second trip, we actually were out there and second trip, like literally weeks before we got there, the tsunami had happened and Fukushima had happened, and Fukushima actually has some epic creeking, some awesome creeking up there. And so that was on our map. We were like, yeah, we should go to Fukushima. Wow. And like check out Fukushima, and there's all these awesome creeks there and do all this type of stuff. But the tsunami happened, so I called Yoshi, and I was like, dude, is it even acceptable for us to come over there now? Yeah. It's like, yeah, we want you guys to come out, love you guys to come out. And we're like, hey, can we help out? And he was like, no, like we got this. Japanese very proud, and like we'll handle this type of stuff, and we'll just stay away from there. Not to, the radiation, everything was definitely a concern. And we're like, sure, we'll stay in southern Japan and stay away from all that up there. And, just trip goes on. Right. Well, and then I get a call from Yoshi, and Yoshi's like, no, actually I got in. We got you in. We're going to do some relief efforts. And so that was pretty massive, man. I mean, in the middle of the trip, rolled up to Fukushima, like our Yoshi's like, reading the signs, translating for us all the kanji. And he's like, yeah, we got to roll up the windows. It's radiation. And like, no one really knew. And then you get outside and we were cleaning up in this amazing like deathscape of just wrecked buildings and boats on top of like 5-story buildings and just everything gone. And Fukushima's right there. And we're just picking up all this trash and trying to clean up barely putting a dent, not even a dent, not even in like this like acre. We couldn't even put a dent in the acre that we were on, let alone like what happened out there. Yeah. And radiation be damned. Like we kind of did that, and then we that was all they allowed us to do, and then we went back out, and it was a sobering moment, and started kayaking again. And
you're part of a pretty momentous piece of history there.
Yeah, that was huge. That was pretty massive. And, it was sad to see because I was there before and afterwards in Fukushima, literally in Fukushima, running some of the coolest.
Saw the devastation, firsthand what it was and what it became.
Yep. And that northern Fukushima area, that band of granite there has a lot of steep creeks. And if you're into the low water, steep creeking like I am, it's a paradise.
Steep creeker heaven, huh?
Yeah, it is. And
that's cool
yeah.
Man, well, so I want to kind of kind of trace the arch of your life a little bit here, because we've seen you kind of rise up from a budding teenage kayaker and really, reach some of the higher levels of boating and get after it and do some cool media stuff. But, what I know Nick was telling me, I think I heard a little bit about this at the time, but you had a pretty serious accident that sounds like is pretty life-changing, I guess, I imagine.
Yeah.
Like what happened there?
Man, so yeah, no, like this whole heyday of Huckin Huge and Cody Kayaking, that was like, after the Marine Corps in 2006 through like 2012-ish. And I had a few pauses in my kayaking, but one of them I was out on Lake Clementine outside of Auburn with Scott Lindgren, and we're on his wakeboard boat. It was dope. And I grew up wakeboarding out here in Arizona, and I was wake skating, which is a wakeboard without bindings. And you're still going 18 to 22 miles an hour, jumping the wake, but you're doing this. And I was doing this handle pass, man. Yeah, and I'm doing a handle pass and just caught an edge and just whipped backwards and ripped off my fucking pec.
Oh, jeez.
And so it was pretty obvious. Like all of a sudden my biceps huge with blood. I couldn't move, and Lindgren got me to the shore, and we were like, yep, going to the hospital, fucked up. Like a typical kayaker, like you don't get hurt kayaking. It's like mountain biking or everything skiing. It's like you jacked yourself up doing that type of stuff, not kayaking.
Yeah. Someone described it well as, the problem with kayakers is they're used to expect, good kayakers that are, lifestyle kayakers. They're used to going hard at stuff. And so they go and do something that they're not as good at, but they bring the same mentality to it. And that's what gets them in trouble. Yeah.
That's exactly it. You just nailed it on the spot, or whoever said that nailed it on the spot, because I'm like, yeah, I got this. I grew up wakeboarding and I never wake skated. I'm trying 360s and just wreck it. And so it took me out a good 3 years, ripped off the pec, and shoulders pretty fucked up, anyways, with kayaking and all that type of stuff. So the pec was like a good dose of being hurt. And so
that's basically the tendon just gets torn is effectively what happens. And
and my muscle. Yeah, and so the tendon to the shoulder from the pec had to get sewn back together. And dude, I'll never forget my surgeon. His last name was Dang. So Dr. Dang. Dude,
perfect.
Dr. Dang was in the VA in San Francisco, and all he wanted, and he bumped me up to the top of the list of surgeries to get in quick, because the VA's got a notorious backlog of patients waiting to get seen, but it was pretty substantial. And I was like, okay, you got to get in. And yes, this guy's a professional kayaker. Dr. Dane just wanted a poster of the risen sun. And so my movie, and I signed it and all this type of stuff. And he described it to me as sewing wet tissue paper back together.
Ooh.
And it was a great visual. And the way he did it to me, and I knew he knew that I would kind of instantly be, stir crazy, sitting on the couch, ready, trying to get better. He was like, take this fucking easy. You're sewing together, wet tissue paper. And so that visual stuck with me. So I sat out a lot and sat out another season. That season turned into I was like boating around a little bit, but not to the level that I was doing. And that really kind of that was kind of the end of that level of kayaking.
That was your
And
first big injury, huh?
Big injury,
really shut you down.
Yeah. Not typically injury prone. I was fortunate enough, knock on wood, fortunate enough to get through kayaking without, the classic injuries that come along with kayaking. No rotator cuff tears. I had a little
plenty of opportunity, that's for sure.
I
mean,
sure
the stuff
did,
you were
man.
running. Good.
Oh my gosh, yeah. What got me in that would be like a word of warning to all the paddlers out there listening is take care of your ears. That surfer's ear is no joke. And so I got a glimpse of that. And so that was just probably the most substantial injury that I had in that. Besides, Christopher Creek got me. I was in the ER room, Big Lebowski. I put my elbow in that little notch on the way down.
Heard about that.
Chipped off an elbow there, and your typical little skateboard cuts and bruises and breaks and all that type of stuff. But no, then as a part of some pretty massive injuries on the river. And, I witnessed all that, but fortunate enough not to get into that. And then, my brother Bradt and I, we were up in Canada where we learned how to kayak in the winter. We had never been up there in the winter. And, both of us are Arizona kids. We'd never been on a snowmobile. At least I'd never been on a snowmobile. Maybe Bradt hadn't been either. We're ripping across a frozen lake. And my brother Bradt is driving. I'm in the middle, and my brother-in-law, who is a former professional lacrosse player, Chad Wiedmeyer, is behind us, and we're all hugging each other on this giant snowmobile ripping across the lake after eating moose on a campfire on this little crazy island. It was crazy, and it was that's what a record scratch, blackout. I don't remember anything else, but I guess what had happened was we were in a snowstorm. And my brother, not at incredible high speeds. Those fucking things can go 100 miles an hour, but I think we're at least going 30, 40 miles an hour. Took it into a tree or a rock or something. No one really quite remembers. I certainly don't. And, what happened was I wake up and I guess I was in a coma. And what had happened was the impact. My brother was driving in the front. It sent him into the handlebars or a tree or the rock or whatever we hit, and it split his head from his nose all the way up and over his head down to his back, and it blew up his bladder. His bladder erupted, and so his head split in half, and I'm knocked out, and my brother-in-law is concussed, and so my little brother comes walking down this frozen lake at 10 o'clock at night, where the fuck are these guys? My little brother and our good friend. And they find us, and I'm frozen underneath a tree. Brett's got blood everywhere. And so I think if Brett hadn't gotten so cut and all the gore and the blood, I don't think anybody would have called the paramedics. But the paramedics finally got to this remote lake out in the middle of Ripon in Quebec. And by that point, my eyes were rolling in the back of my head, and they're Brett's getting to the hospital, but this dude right here, this dude needs to go right now. He's internally bleeding. And what had happened was just the impact of stopping. Again, that G's, the deceleration of stopping so fast, it had torn my aorta. And so the aorta into the heart tore, and I was internally bleeding. They kept me cold. I went from hospital to hospital. I ended up in Ottawa, and this top surgeons, everybody, it was they're calling my wife and my baby boy and family, putting the phone up to my ear, say your goodbyes. And I slip into a coma, and, medically induced as well.
But you remember that period up into the coma?
Nothing.
No, you don't remember any of that?
I remember the moose steaks and a beer out on the ice. That's it.
Black.
And then black. And I think that is actually a human's defense mechanism,
Yeah, I'm sure.
It's you hear about people almost getting eaten by like, the hippo. And it's like they just kind of accept and go black. And it's like, that was one of those things. Maybe as I look back on it, it was like a bird's eye view. Like maybe that's what I was protecting myself from. I don't know. But I wake up out of the coma a couple weeks later, and my whole family standing over me. I'm like, wow, what the fuck are you guys doing here? And they're like, yeah, Cody, you got hurt. And then I feel the pain. And they're like, yeah, Cody, you're paralyzed.
Holy
And
shit.
then I feel the pain even more. And then they're like, and then also, let me just set the context here. This is January 2020. So January 18th, 2020, I get hurt and I wake up out of the coma sometime in what's the next month? February. I wake up in February, and then I start the recovery in Ottawa. They transfer me in March, and they're all standing over me, and they're like, yeah, and there's this new fucking thing called COVID. And we can't be here. Yeah. It was crazy. It was crazy. So like I remember like, like if I could even muster a minute, kind of like these nurses and doctors and everybody, and I had tubes and IV things, and I would actually gauge how well I was doing by the amount of tubes coming out of my bellies and chest. Like, dude, I had like 17 at one day, and I'd wake up the next day and I'd count 15. I'm like, yeah, I'm fucking doing better. and then like I was down to like 7 tubes, 2 IV stands. I'm like, yeah, sweet. And like, you just get sit up and you're nauseous and you're spinning, and like I would like wheel out. We wheel down just to get some fresh air. And I remember like seeing like the Starbucks in the lobby of the hospital go from like, everybody all fine and happy to like, now there's no more tables. Tables are pushed to the side. Now there's only a couple people in line, and now there's a social distancing, and now the Starbucks is fucking closed, and now your family can't come, and now you're in the hospital. I got transferred on like a life flight to San Diego and sat in the hospital for months on end, just getting better in the spinal cord injury unit during the middle of COVID.
And your family couldn't come see you at all during that
couldn't
period?
Come see me at all. I mean, it was wild. And I look back on that, and it was like I then started to just quietly, like I'm in the spinal cord injury unit, and there's like I'm paraplegic now, and what had happened was like a lot of major organs had started to die, and so they actually total colectomy. They removed all of my large intestine and some of my small intestine. That shit's hardcore. That shit's almost harder than the paralysis. And so I'm dealing with all this stuff coming at me. I'm like, dude, out of all the fucking things I've done, like the kayaking, the rock climbing, you name it, combat, a goddamn snowmobile caught me. And then, at that too, like I wasn't even in charge of the snowmobile that I got hurt on. And I thank my lucky stars that like me and my brother Bradt were just so close and tight growing up together that like it really has not even put a ripple in our relationship. In fact, like it's almost been stronger. Like, now we call each other daily, and all this type of stuff. And we talk all the time. And, it's very, very tight because, as much as I got hurt, it hurt him too. And, then I'm like, staring down the barrel of like this epic recovery. And this epic recovery is now as a paraplegic, not going to be able to ever climb a mountain, not ever going to be able to go explore, or, like now we're talking about how is my car or my truck going to be outfitted with, wheelchair ramps and all this type of stuff, and like adaptive steering and all this type of stuff. So it is just on top of the pain, like the crushing prospect of the future. And
absolutely, I can't imagine.
Yeah, it was pretty hardcore. And then of course, me and my wife Shantae, we have our little baby boy. He's 8 months old at the time.
Yeah.
And
you
so I was sad
to see him for all this time.
I hadn't been able to see him. And then so I'm like, okay, I get this message. I'm like, River just took his first steps. I'm like, dude, I am gonna learn how to walk with my son.
Wow.
It was a massive moment. And I think everybody out there they have these moments in your life. And I hope you all are aware when they happen. It's like a little mini download. And like the universe just gives you a little wink and a nod. of like what could happen and save that, because it was just a massive little download out there that I had. I'm like, yep, I'm going to learn how to walk with my son. And he kicked my ass. He walked way around and, he'd run around, but like, I'm happy to report after 4 fucking years of working, I just recently got out of my canes and forearm crutches, but for a long time there I was in a wheelchair and then turned into forearm crutches. And somehow, some way, the human body is absolutely amazing. Like, I still have very little feeling on my legs. The missing intestines and the total colostomy is like such high maintenance and all that type of stuff. Both feet are paralyzed, left quad paralyzed. Dude, I take some epic falls. And like, you know what was the best part? And like, giving it back to kayaking too, was like, the saying on the river, at least, in the cruise I rolled with, is like, we're all in between swims. You're in between a swim. Like, yes, your last swim won't be your last swim. There's another one coming up. And I use that, and I would tell my nurses, I'm like, I'm just in between falls. I'd fall daily. And these fucking spinal cord injury clinics, they have like this board, like last how many days since the last injury. Like on a construction site, it's like how many days since the last fall. Really? And like when I got there, it was like 294 days since the last fall. And then I was like falling weekly. And so these nurses hated me because they would just get shit on. I was ruining the records, and they just get like lectured and safety protocols, and everybody's on lockdown. And why is this fucking kid falling out of his thing?
Leave it to the wild kayaker to fuck up the safety protocols.
Man, I fell out of my bed in the middle of the night. I was like, it was COVID. Everybody was confused. The staff was confused. No one knew how to do. If you got checked up on. If I got checked up on, like there was one night where they found me on the floor and it was like drama. And then I'm like, all this type of stuff. And like, dude, you're a troublemaker. Like, stop whatever you're doing. I'm like, there is absolutely no way, first of all. And, that little nugget, I'm going to learn how to, walk with my son, really was super huge. And then of course, I had, just like that old school Marine, when he was telling me, he's like, in 10 years, this combat's going to slap you in the face. I had an old school nurse, and she was from Jamaica, and she was in the Navy. And she told me, and she was like, just wait, Cody, you're trying hard now, and you got all this stuff. It's not even hard yet. Wait until you get home and reality hits you. And that really was it. And she was absolutely wise to that moment, because like, when an injury like this, like the hospital is out of control. I could barely lived and barely survived the hospital. I had like, 2 near death moments, when my intestines all died. I was, 21 bags of transfusions and like dead, and families like, Cody didn't live and all this type of stuff. But then like, massive, that's huge. But then like the real huge gut punch, no pun intended, was like, just getting back home. And getting back home. And now I'm like, watching the little 8-month-old river run for a cactus. And like the old Cody, I could swat him from the cactus from across the yard in a second. Now everything in my dad body is telling me like, go grab your son, and I can't move.
Yeah.
Crazy.
You must really feel the difference once you're in a familiar place, right? And it's like all the things that your old life probably comes flooding back prior to the injury.
It was. And you know what, like what was looming out there this whole time, and like, all the family was very concerned, and like, my wife was very concerned. It's like, how is Cody going to deal with not being able to move?
Yeah, for someone
super concerned,
whose life is all about movement at an extreme level, right? I mean, it's one thing. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's impossibly difficult for anybody, but to live the life that you've lived and have to see that transition must just be, I can't imagine how difficult it is.
It's hard. I can't explain it. There's kayakers that I'm familiar with. I mean, I was kayaking on the river and seeing some spinal cord injuries, one of the most famously is, Jason Craig. And, I actually
that story,
and he broke his back in front of me. And an epic, life flight out and paralysis and all that type of stuff. And I actually, and then, back into the 90s, Grant Corgan, he was out there and he was on the T cuts with us. And this guy now, like our Craig, Jason, and Grant are just like, they were awesome ref. Like I called them. I was like, yo, what do I do with nerve pain? I'll never forget Jason Craig. Shout out to Jason Craig. He was like, dude, I always considered the nerve pain a blessing because it meant something was reconnecting. Just deal with it.
Yeah.
You know, and there's like the kayaking community to the rescue.
You reframe it. Yeah.
Yeah, because there are some badasses in the kayaking community. They probably experienced all of that and harder shit than you have before. And like, you know, just epic misadventures, epic, you know, physical feats, epic injuries, all this type of stuff, all, you know, epic lifestyles, all this type of things. And it's just like, man, how amazing. And I took these little nuggets of wisdom from those two. And, you know, I was fortunate enough that, you know, one day, just kind of like, almost like a, I don't know if you've seen Kill Bill.
Yeah.
Famous. She's sitting in the bed, paralyzed, and she's like, move your little toe and like move your big toe. And she's yeah. And so like, I actually relived that, dude. I was in there. I was like, man, that's a twitch. And like this twitch is happening. And so I was like, just little moments like that. And the human body is pretty incredible to the point where like now, yeah, I'm in between falls. I take some crazy ass falls. I scare the crap out of myself. But, you know, it's like, what else am I going to do? Literally, like, what else are you going to do? Like, just sit on the couch and watch Netflix?
Yeah. I mean, what was like your low point? Did you ever hit a point where you're like, I wish I was just taken out by this. I wish I didn't make it.
Big time. Yep. And that was that thought actually crossed my mind right when I woke up, and the family was standing over me. It was like, yeah, you're paralyzed. I was like, why? You know, like, why did I get saved? Right. And I thank my lucky stars I did. But then it was also, you know, a moment with like my son out here in Phoenix running for a cactus and I can't do anything. Like those types of helplessness, and your whole body is telling you to do something, but you just can't do it. And spinal cord injury, like it's a whole life 2.0. And, you know, what really helped me out a ton was like, everybody also, this is COVID time too. We're all in lockdown. So no one else is doing anything else cool anyways. Everyone's sitting at home. So like I had
consolation.
Dude, everybody's at home. Everyone's bitching about like just being stuck inside. I'm like, oh yeah, join the party. So, you know, like I had my whole family with me and everybody's around, and, you know, everybody's on pandemic lockdowns and no one's doing anything. And it's like, everyone's, you know, complaining about no toilet paper in the hospital, you know, grocery stores. I'm like, boy,
life is so hard, huh?
Yeah, right. And so I was like, you know, it was a good nursery for me to kind of get better, and it didn't happen in that time. In fact, like it only started happening in the past year or two. I'm happy to report now, you know, I've since that wake skating injury when I pulled out my chest, I then started buying houses. I started buying houses, and I was a general contractor working and buying houses and buying, just like, dude, this was like, given time frame too, is like 2012, 2013, still kind of like the lulls of the recession. So I was buying the houses that people were like pouring concrete down the drains and tearing out the copper and all this type of stuff. And I was fixing them up and selling them. And I was, you know, barely getting paid for the time it took to rehab these homes. But like that kind of led into like, you know, now a general contracting business where I am taking, like, dude, I'm not a city kid by any stretch of the imagination. And like when I work in the city, I just feel the vibrations and just hum of all the busy bees, and I want to get the fuck out. So like I just do all these projects in the periphery, out in the beautiful Sonoran Desert, building wild, creative type structures way out there. You know, like, you know, dude, we've been building a structure into these boulders on top of a mountain for years now. And I'm like, yeah, we can never get a concrete truck up there, but we can hike everything up. And you know what? Those boulders are more better foundations than any concrete we could pour. And it's like, yeah, it was just tying to these boulders and making like little cabins like that. And so I always
still finding an outlet for that creativity, it sounds like.
It's awesome. And you know what, and I don't think I've ever told anybody this ever, but this is my creative process. And it's kind of some of our houses have caught on out here in the desert. It's pretty sweet. But how I think of how to build a house now in these remote environments, just like how when you're on an expedition kayaking, like when it's the end of the day, everybody's a little beat down and you're trying to find the perfect camp.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a luxury and such an exciting moment when you find that perfect camp.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, hell yeah, this is where we're
This
camping.
is
This is
it.
dope.
Yeah.
This is dope. Of
I know that
course, it comes
feeling.
on. Oh, it's awesome. And there's the other side of the coin where it's like, this is a shit camp, but we're just going to get through the night and we're going to keep on, and you're sleeping on a boulder or anything like that. But like,
Totally.
dude, those random epic camps you come across, like that's how I kind of approach my building process. I'm like, if I was kayaking down the river, would I pull over to this spot? And how, if I did, how would I make my camp? And so that's kind of the orientation of like these structures, and they're really kind of cool. And it's I'm able to get out there and go see some wild spots of Arizona. Found a couple new little creeks. Actually, found a couple cool creeks. Maybe one day might get out there and go do it. But now since the injury, I was able to finally get back into the boat this past winter. I did the Tunnel Creek, and in my absence, this boom of pack rafting has happened.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, imagine that. Like, right now I'm doing like a pedal assist e-bike. Like that technology and mountain biking wasn't around, back in the day. And now like I'm injured, I'm paraplegic, and like, hey, I can still go mountain biking. Or like,
awesome.
With kayaking, I'm like, I see my future as maybe there'll always be the hard shell, but like if I could push some limits into some of these obscure spots, it's going to be with a pack raft. And I think you can get back into some of these spots that even the hard shell guys that are, fully abled, top of the game, wouldn't want to or couldn't get into. You could get into that with a pack raft. And I haven't done it yet, full disclosure, but I'm like, boy, that's a cool little thing because, when I'm on the river now, dude, fucking scouting or portaging is the scariest part.
Yeah.
Like, just getting around on the river rocks and all that type of stuff as a paraplegic, it is a sketchy prospect. And like, I have this overwhelming sense of like, I'm an incredible liability to whoever I'm on the river with. Like the team has got to watch out for this paralyzed dude crawling through boulders, and so like, I'm very aware that it's tough, but like maybe just maybe I can find some slip and slides out here. I think we found some slip and slides in a little pack raft.
I love it that you still got it. You're still finding it. That's amazing, man. I don't even know what to say. I'm really impressed that you can figure out a way to like, find things to look forward to keep yourself going, to like keep doing the things that you love to do with such a debilitating injury.
Totally. But I mean, like,
I guess that's what you said. Like, what choice do you have? Like, you can,
what other
you can
choice,
just
right?
sink into feeling sorry for yourself, which doesn't make anything better, or you can live with it. I mean, what are the things that keep you going now? What really like make you want to live?
Yeah, totally. And so like River, our little son River, and full disclosure, that was my wife's choice of names. I was like, I'm not going to be the kayaker that names the kid River. It's like, no. And then plus we're from Phoenix, so like River Phoenix. Like, what the fuck?
I never even thought about that.
I was like, dude, like, what? No, like, we could come up with something cool. And like, she's like, no, like you had this kayaking and, that's whole history and it's a dope name. Like, let's do that. I'm like, cool. Okay. But it sounds cliche, but really like I'm super, super motivated to just show him how much adventures I got in the back pocket, and, friends and family and all that. But I'm raising a young man right now. And this young man, has a lot to learn. And I've got a lot of cautionary tales and a lot of teachings, hopefully, to, pass down to him. And, he's also got that little spark too, man. Like, as I can't do any of the rock climbing, in our backyard, we live next to a mountain in the Phoenix Preserve, and all of a sudden he's fucking up the cliff, and I'm like, dude, it's karma coming back to bite me in the ass. Like,
Yeah,
this kid is gonna be.
he's clearly your boy, huh?
He is. And you know what? That's motivating as hell as a father to see.
Yeah.
And like, you want to put that out there because like the coolest people that I've met on all my travels across the world are like the kayakers, like all time, like the coolest bunch. And like they really are. So like, I in a way, I hope he's not a class 5 kayaker, because with class 5 kayaking, there is some super dangerous parts of that, and he's going to worry his mother to death. But like, I also hope he's a class 5 kayaker too. It'd be cool. Like, because he's going to learn a lot, or an epic, just outdoors. Just nature, and nature really is like the saving grace, because like, in an injury like what I experienced, it was like going to the gym was hell on earth. But like, and I lived in the gym as a Marine. After the Marine Corps and kayaking, I did a lot of lifting. I've spent decades in the gym. But going out and just for an injury like what I experienced, just putting one foot in front of the other outside, and I'm not talking about like in a park or on the street, like on a real trail, with like no one else out there, just by yourself, where you could take an epic fall. And you don't have to look around, and there's like the cow trail of people hiking the popular trail. Like, go find something way out there, obscure, in nature, and sit with it for a second and just push yourself. And it doesn't always have to be like that waterfall. It could just be like sitting with yourself for like a day out in nature, on a rock, on top of a mountain, in the cactuses. It's huge. Underneath a boulder. Like, you can really get out there and go do some epic stuff, all the way to like exploring the next first ascent.
Yeah, that's super cool. I mean, when we were just trying to coordinate some time to talk before this interview and just touch base and everything, you seem to have a packed schedule. You're like, oh yeah, I was just out in the mountains, and man, I'm coming back, but I'm going to turn right back around and grab a backpack and go back out there. And I didn't know the extent of your injuries or anything either. And it's pretty inspiring, I think, to hear that like
rock on, man.
You don't have to be shut down, right? Like, you can you can keep going at any level and find that same kind of inspiration and joy and power of nature and all that. That's super cool to hear.
It is. And you know what? I full credit goes to Mother Nature for why my schedule is so packed. Because like in Switzerland, Switzerland's not been invaded because they call it general winter. The Alps in winter is going to thwart anybody invading Switzerland. Well, what's coming up in Phoenix is general summer, and your outdoor shit is squashed. So you better get it while you got it right now, because like, so I'm like, dude, we were like at peak spring, and today was 98 degrees. And so those triple digit days are inbound, and like, you got to get it while it's hot right now. Like, these are fleeting moments. I think the salt's at 800 CFS, and like, it's going to be shut down till October coming up. So explore where I can.
I think we've like come full circle to where we started, which is if you're in Arizona, like, you've got to appreciate the short moments of joy you have, because it's not going to last for long. Everything's ephemeral there.
Totally. So yeah, it's been this past spring, I've really been getting after it and building super cool stuff out in these boulders. It's like, looks like Joshua Tree, big giant boulders, and found a little creek right nearby. I've been looking at little waterfalls and taking dips in the pool, and and then of course just kind of doing some backpacking. And backpacking now, I mean, that's like my class 5. Like, just putting in a 4-mile day is massive for me. So, epic falls, epic twists, forearm crutches, you name it, but it's still outside.
Yeah. Still pushing yourself.
Yeah.
Man, Cody, I could talk to you all day. It's been like awesome time talking to you. Like, really, really enjoyed it. I've said it before, but it's one of the reasons I like doing this podcast, is because I get to like find super interesting people to talk to. And it's just like really cool to hear the arc of your life and all the adventures you have, and like definitely what can't wait to hear like what more adventures you find, because I think it sounds like they're there for you. You're not going to quit.
Yeah, well, cheers, man, and thank you for the opportunity for me to come on here and crack a beer and ramble with you.
Absolutely. Anytime,
Yeah.
anytime. Anything else you wanna say before we shut her down?
Oh, you know what? I'm just looking at the kayaking community today, and I love you all. I think it's an awesome thing. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep pushing it, and hopefully, I'll see you out on the river.